Okay, what's up? What's happening? I got a new t-shirt yesterday. It says analog. I like it. Stereo receiver. I got to get a new receiver for home and some speakers. I'm going to get a little setup because I got two turntables. I brought this up before. I got lots of records, but I can't use any of them. So I need to set up a little zone at home. This year, it's going to happen. A little fun LP zone. I like it. It's not called vinyl. It's called LPs. LPs. Records. Vinyl. No. LPs. I'm so old. What's happening, everybody? What are you guys doing out there? Who we got here? Spiru Blake. Van Boingo. Christopher. Got all kinds of folks here in the house. What's happening with all of you? We got Ferd, we got Billy, we got Bent Tom, Smitry. We got Joe. Joe says, Pete must be getting coffee. It's true. That's what I was doing. So, what have I been doing this week? This week, I spent a lot of time with the Tonex box. Their capture box, specifically. And I guess more accurately, the Tonex plugin. Because Tonex is really a plugin that you can use with any reamp box. This is if you're trying to make captures. Wait, let me back up. Tonex is a plugin that you can load in, well, it'll run standalone, so you can use it as a standalone application in your Mac or PC. But it'll also work on the channel in a DAW. And what it is basically like a way to load captures, which is kind of like a Kemper profile. But it's a Tonex capture instead, or a quad cortex capture. Similar, but you're doing it within the computer in a plug-in. But then, of course, they make the Tonex pedal as well, which has opened up a whole new world, because you can then load those things onto one of these and put this on a pedal board and take those sounds with you and use them, obviously, live or for recording. Yeah, and I gotta say, damn, is it impressive. You know, as an amp guy, I almost don't want to like it, but it is really good. It's really, really good. Some of the sounds, I mean, they come out so, you're kind of like, when I've done these things before, generally speaking, I mean, the Kemper's great at what it does. Quad Cortex is great at what it does too. You know, they're terrific. This one, I must say, it's like, and I use Quad Cortex. I love the Quad Cortex, and I'm going to do more with it. And then all I'll say about the Tonex is there's something about it where when you do the capture and then you go back and forth between the capture and the actual thing, you're kind of like, because you can do that, you can compare your amp to the capture. You're kind of like, like, you know, where you're listening, you're like, you want to go like, the high end's a little different, or the mids are a little different, or something, right? And this is the first time probably where I've done them. I've gone like, where you go back and forth, and you're like, oh, you know what I mean? And it's good. So I was looking this morning on the gear page on a thread about the Tonex, and the one complaint there was that there's a lot of not great captures. There's a lot of captures and a lot of ones that are not great floating around on the Tonex, because there's like an online share thing where you go on there and basically you can trade profiles with different users and stuff like that, or download ones that are already uploaded to the cloud, sort of thing. And I guess most of them are pretty bad, is what the gist of the thread said. And it seems like a lot of them are being done of modelers. So like somebody will say, you know, JCM 800, and they've actually just gone in a Helix and called up a JCM 800 with a cab sim and then made a capture of that and uploaded it. So it's not actual amps. And sometimes they're not being forthcoming about that. So you don't know whether you're getting a real amp or not or whatever. So that's an issue. But anyways, I think what's going on is I'm going to, just in my little world, I'm going to make a video demo. I've been working on it, making a bunch of captures. They take a long time. They kind of take about, I would say, 20 to 30 minutes per capture. And that has taken me all week to do about 4 amps. to my satisfaction. Because you might do one and then go, I wish I'd done, and then you got to start over, you know? So my thing is I'm going to make a video where I've captured 4 of my amps with various sounds, and I've done both full rig captures, which includes a cabinet and microphone in the capture, and also direct captures, which is just the amp head via reactive load, right? And I'm taking the line out of the reactive load, putting the head in the box, and then adding an IR to it later for speaker simulation. So you got your direct amp captures and you got your full rig captures. A variety of those. And make a video out of those with a song so you can hear the sounds. And then these will be available somehow as a package from me. These same captures. So I've decided to do 4 kind of boutique esoteric amps. The Germino that's sitting back there, the red Germino that's got Jose style mods to it. My 72 Marshall, that's not boutique, that's a 72 Marshall, but cool vintage amp. JMP. My Jim Kelly, which is sitting right there, which is beautiful for clean and an alternate sort of crunch to the Marshall thing. I wanted something that was very different than, you know, because I got 2 sort of Marshall flavored, Germino and the Marshall up there. So the Jim Kelly, and then this top hat right here, which is my AC30 of choice as of late, and it's a brilliant sounding amp for that. Both the normal channel and the top boost channel. And yeah, so there'll be captures of all those amps. All the way from really nice cleans through to, you know, full on hair metal. No, I don't know. With the Germino. Boosted and heavy. And yeah, just a variety of stuff there. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. Somebody said, great video, great audio. How's it? It looks pretty good today, right? I played with the exposure settings. I'm not really crazy about my webcam. I think I need to upgrade to maybe this one's a couple years old, and it just, for some reason I have to turn the exposure. Like I barely have my studio lights on in here. They're quite low. They're set at like 20%. And then I've got the exposure cranked way down on the camera, and it still sort of can look a little blown out sometimes, but it looks pretty good today. I spent 5 minutes on it before I went live. Not some time, but a little bit of time. Do I recommend a small amp or something like Tone X for hobbyists? Oh, I don't know. I mean, the most important thing if you're a hobbyist, or especially if you're a student guitar player, is to not get caught up in tech, I think. So whatever makes you play more, you know, when you're learning or just when you're having fun, maybe some of these devices. I do worry about people getting caught up in, like, for example, some people were saying the amount of time it's taking them to go through all these captures where 80% of them sort of suck. That's what people were saying on the Gear Page thread, that there's so many bad ones up there. Like, that is a waste of time, and it'll kind of turn you off from guitar if you're just sitting there going, paging through, you know. I don't like that, you know, that idea of paging through stuff that just you end up getting burned out. You sit down thinking, this is going to be great, and like 20 minutes or 45 minutes later, you haven't really played. You've just been pushing a button to scroll through things, and you're like, this is boring. I'm uninspired, you know, you don't want to go there. So I think it's just important to have a great couple sounds is the most important thing, especially when you're learning. And even later, like, you know, when you're doing stuff like this, it's good to, even as a, you know, experienced guitar player or musician, it's good to set aside the time and not think, I'm going to sit down and practice right now and then just end up paging through profiles or whatever. I think that's a problem. It's no different than, you know, it's prioritizing your time or sort of designating time to practice and work on things, and then designating time to, like, you know, today I'm not going to do that. Today I'm going to use 2 sounds that I know and love, and I'm going to learn some stuff, you know, and just being able to focus, you know. I remember when I was learning all that Van Halen material to do that Van Halen set that I did a couple of years ago. I made a Helix profile that had a Van Halen sound in it with the phaser and the flanger and stuff, so that when I was at home in the mornings, I could get up and just sit down and play. I didn't worry about, it wasn't even the rig I was going to actually use at the gig. That was on a Quad Cortex, and I had that here actually all set up. So here I could turn on the rig, have my actual rig I was going to use with the quad and everything. And I had it dialed into practice so that I could just sit down and learn the tunes. And then at home, I had the Helix, a very similar rig, similar sounds, same effect. You know, Van Halen is, once you've got that amp and the sort of reverb thing happening and a bit of you know, maybe the pitch effect for one thing, the delay, the certain couple delays that he would use, or few delays, and then the flanger and the phaser. That's it. So I just made that little rig, and then I practiced a lot, like for 2 months, practiced those songs, you know. But it was very efficient. I could just turn it on and start playing, and it reminded me doing that actually, like of how great it is to just sit down and practice and not play with gear. So there's a super chat from Christopher. Christopher Hallisey, would you rather have a current production Fender Professional 2 Strat or something else? Oh, well, I mean, I'm a Sir guy, so, I mean, I have this is my version of the Fender Professional. My signature guitar. You know, this thing is basically dialed into every single spec that I could want. And while we continue to always, you know, make changes and ideas and improvements and talk about things we could do differently, you know, at any given time, hopefully, if you've got a signature guitar, it's pretty damn close to perfect of what you would want, you know. So that's mine. But that's not saying that the Fender isn't a good guitar. I'm not sure the specs of the Professional 2 Strat, or, you know, Music Man's doing nice stuff, obviously. Tom Anderson, PRS, I think they're all doing some nice stuff. It's a wonderful world we live in, where there's all these great choices. You know, we live in a time of abundance. But for me, the Sir is that's my main squeeze, you know, and I just love their guitars. I tend to find when I play other guitars, like I've played some PRSs, you know, where I haven't played a lot of PRSs over the years. I own 2 in my lifetime. They were both nice guitars, but then I spend a lot of years like where I probably don't ever pick up a PRS. But then I'll pick one up. I remember the last one was probably at the GitCon conference a number of years ago, and I played a couple that were there, and one of them was the Mayer, you know, Silver Sky. It's very nice. And I really enjoyed the in-between pickup positions. You know, it's a really quality Strat. You know, I thought it was a really good guitar. And you know, occasionally I'll pick up other things. Tom Anderson, the last Tom Anderson I picked up was in Indonesia, in a store that was a very, you know, high-end boutique store in Indonesia that has a number of, you know, really cool. They sell Sir and Anderson and a bunch of other guitars, PRS and stuff. And I was doing a clinic there, and I was like, I've never really spent a lot of time with the Tom Anderson. I sat down and played one for a little while, and I was like, oh, it's cool. And actually, you know, the neck on it was not dissimilar to the one on my signature guitar. Now that I think about it, it had a little V to it, and I think some Tom Andersons have that. Yeah, a great guitar, and I know Sir has great respect for Anderson and their friends and stuff. And Music Man's, well, now I have that EVH model here. It's a wonderful guitar, you know, and a really great tone, and so all these companies are doing terrific stuff, but, you know, Sir is it's the distilled down into exactly what I want in a guitar, and I just love my guitar. So, yeah. So the capture, oh, that's a good question. So the captures sound the same. How is the feel? That's what a YouTube video can't convey. That's correct. And I would say the feel is a little different. Just because you're plugged into, when you're using a plug-in, you're plugged into an interface, and then going through an A to D converter, and then the processing's happening within the you know, standalone program or the plugin, and it does feel a little different. It's not a bad feel, I wouldn't say. Would it prevent me from using it or something? No. Is it exactly the same? No. It doesn't feel quite. Yeah, you're right. There's a little thing where it's maybe not quite as connected feeling. I was playing with it a little bit because sometimes people talk about that. I'm like, oh, is that just BS or whatever? Like the feel. But I was like, well, this is kind of weird. You're playing. The thing that got me thinking about it was that I was looking at Logic when I was printing a plugin. You might have seen the little clip I did on Instagram a couple weeks ago where I had 2 tracks that I had printed at the exact same time. One was the real amp and cab, and then one was the plugin that version of ToneX with the capture I just created, and I just armed them both and then played a part into them, and then I cut between them in the video so that you could hear how close they were. But you can see the differences of course the one track that has the plug-in on the channel, you're printing the DI guitar, so it looks a lot more spiky because the audio file reflects that there's no compression it's just straight up DI guitar, right? The other one is, of course, the mic's on the cabinet, and it's all already, you know, so that got me thinking about it. Like, well, you're taking this, you know, DI sound, and it's going into the computer, and then the plugin's replicating, and there's a little bit of latency. And does that feel exactly the same as when you're plugged directly into an amp and it's all happening in the amp, and then you know what I mean? So but it's not bad or anything. It's a little noticeable under the fingers, you know? And then when you weigh I mean, I'm an amp guy. I love amps, so this is hard for me to even think about or say. But when you weigh you can take the sound and then put it in this thing, and then carry it around with you. It's kind of like what we're talking about here is taking amplifiers that are thousands of dollars, and in the case of with the cabinet, a vintage cabinet that's got $4,000 or $5,000 worth of microphones and mic preamp on it, and you're taking that and you're putting it in this little box and taking it with you, and it's sort of like, I would say, pretty indistinguishable in a mix. It's like, there's always going to be a reason to use amps. I believe it's not going to go away. Users of amps are I don't think it's like that. Oh, this is going to kill amps or anything. I think if that was going to happen, it would have happened with the Kemper, or would have happened. Amps are, at least in some circles, still doing really well. So sales wise and popularity wise, and there's some people, they're just cool. There's nothing, it's like, it's just cool to use amps. So it's like, there's all these angles, but it is pretty cool that you can take that and bottle it and then take it with you and get a great result, and get work done. Ben says, "How about them Oilers? I watched the game last night. It was great, and I always think it's funny how, like, I've been in LA for 32 years, something like that, and I'm still an Oilers fan. Even when they're playing against LA, it's like I lived 19 years in Edmonton, and I've lived 32 here, but." You can take the boy out of Edmonton, but I guess you know the rest. So as far as hockey goes, it's just, yeah. I wouldn't be sad if LA ended up winning the series, though, and went on to carry on in the playoffs and stuff. Then I'd be rooting for them, because that's my town too. So whatever, it's all good. Tried acoustic IR live, and seems like it's better without it. I found when using an acoustic IR, I didn't blend it at 100%. I would blend it at maybe like 60% or 80% or something, and then I had to EQ a little bit and add a little compression, and then it sounded great. And of course, not all acoustic impulse responses are created equal. So this is if you take your acoustic guitar, let's say a TAC Mini or a Martin or a Taylor, whatever you've got, and you've got the output of the pickup and preamp that's in it, and then you add via an IR loader box. Could be done in Tonex, it could be done in a number of different, even like something inexpensive like a radar or something. You add an impulse response of an acoustic guitar to that, and in an attempt to, so in other words, you can make an impulse response of a microphone on an acoustic guitar body, and then add that to your pickup sound, and you're going to end up with something that sounds hopefully more akin to a mic'd up guitar. And in practice, I find it works quite well. I mean, when I did it, the few times I've done it live, people have said, "Wow, what's that pickup in that guitar? It sounds really nice," like the sound guy. But that was after me tweaking it and getting it, like I say, maybe not using 100% of the impulse, and also adding some EQ, because you can always blend how much of the impulse response. A lot of people will set it at 100%, so it completely processes. But I found I could set it somewhere around over half, but not all the way to 100%. EQ, compression, get it dialed in just right, and it sounded really good for live use. The ones I had the most luck with are the Worship Tutorials, is what it's called, website. Just search Worship Tutorials Acoustic IR. You will find their website. They make some really, really nice ones. And they even tell you the source pickup that they were working with. So like this will work great with a LR Bags whatever system. If you've got this in your guitar, this is what you know what I mean. So you can kind of one-to-one the IRs to the maybe the pickup and preamp system. Anyways, it worked pretty good for me. And I mean, it's what the it's not a gimmick, because it's what the Fishman Aura, I believe is what it's called. So right, their system is based on. They've kind of done it where they've built it into the guitar and into the system on the guitar, and you can use their So there's a number of different. There's probably other ones out there too where it's like products. I'm not that into acoustic world, so I'm not an expert in this, but it was one of the most satisfying live acoustic sounds that I've had using a good IR specifically with my Takamine guitar. It seemed to work really well, which I'm having a problem with that guitar right now and I have to get it fixed. I got to get the preamp to Takamine because it's a nice guitar, but it's not working. Love ya, says Shred Flintstone. Love you too. What's happening? Good to see you. Sorry about last week, guys. I was off in a trip last week. I got just doing a little consulting gig to help with some guitar rigs, and so I was away for the week, and not the week, but I was away 3-4 days, and I wasn't able to make Sunday Live last week. I hate that when I can't do it, but I was in rehearsal land at 11:30 a.m. by last Sunday. So what else we got here? What else are you guys talking about? Byron says, I have major parameter paralysis. Spend more time tweaking rather than playing. Yeah, it's a problem. You don't want to get into that. You know, you want to set aside the time to tweak the parameters and dial in the sounds. It's one of the things I love most about... I'm a pretty disorganized, scattered guy. But when I have a job to do and I bear down and get it done... I like that aspect. I'm like, well, at least I've got that going for myself. Like I know I can, if I got to learn 25 songs for a set and I got to program my pedal board, I will do it, and I'll get it done. I'll get the sounds dialed in and I'll set aside the time to do it. Learn the songs, program them, get the set dialed, dial it in, boom. And then I go do the work. And it is all very, nice, And I wish I could do that in every aspect of my life, like paying bills and everything. I'm much better than I used to be, but it's just like if you saw my desk right now, it looks like my brain. I mean, there's a lot of pedals on this desk right now. There's cables all over the place, USB cables, my keys, warranty registration cards, a USB charger, there's a tuner, there's some screen cleaner. I have a problem a little bit with clutter, both in my mind and also in the physical. They totally cross over. Can anybody relate? Some people are so not like that, They're so dialed in. I admire that, organized and, What do we got here? Strymon Cloudburst versus Nunaber Illuminate V1. Currently have MXR M300. Very nice pedal, but it's mono. They're both nice. I mean, I think the Nunaber does more, maybe. The Strymon is really nice for what it does, though, which is that, those ambient, crazy... I think the Nunaber is a little more maybe a traditional, where the Cloudburst is a bit more of the shimmer thing, and those types of, ambient. You can set it 100% wet. I mean, you could do that in both. There's going to be lots of crossover between those two pedals, but Nunaber maybe a little more versatile, and Cloudburst a little more that specific thing that you hear it do in videos and stuff. I mean, I tried to use it in other ways in my video too, but you're not going to do spring reverb with it, for example. Whereas in the Illuminate, there probably is. I'm not 100% sure about that. I have to go back and look because I can't remember all the features, but there's probably plates and springs and more tip, right? Am I wrong? I'm not sure. And even in the M300, you've got that. If you need a drippy spring, you can do that. You're a drippy spring. You're drippy spring. No, if you want that, you can probably do that in the Nunaber, right? But the Strymon is not going to do that stuff. So, anyways, just be aware of that. But if you love that sound, when I heard the Cloudburst in the first Strymon videos I saw, I was like, I got to get one of those. That thing sounds killer for that, So, yeah. Okay. Couple more super chats here. Have you ever seen a system that automatically adjusts pickup heights and pulls the pickups you're not using away from the strings? Nope. Never heard of anything like that. I just do it by ear. The main thing with adjusting pickups and heights and things is do it with a relatively clean sound or edge of breakup, because you can only hear the difference in volume, really, with a relatively clean sound. Anytime you're trying to set gain, which to me is pickup height, you're trying to do a relative balance usually between them, and is the bass side too high and becoming too, and then the balance between the pickups. Both the height of the pickup and the tone it's producing itself, and then also the overall balance between the pickups on the guitar. And you can really only do that if the sound is not getting really compressed, which happens when it's the more overdrive you've got in a sound, veering into distortion and stuff, the more compressed the signal's getting. And it's kind of amazing because you could set the pickups up on a guitar with distortion and be like, yeah, that sounds good. And then you'll do it in the clean sound. You'll go, oh, when I go to the neck pickup, it's dropping like 40% in volume. Why don't I hear that when it's distorted? Well, it's the compression and everything that the overdrive is imparting on the sound. So, yeah. Regarding the EVH 1975 bootleg, he had it all 20 years old, vibrato, so consistent at all times. Yeah, it's so good. This is thanks for the super chat as well. This is the I assume you mean at Pasadena High School, 1975. God, it's good. He's so burning in that, man. It's so cool. If you haven't heard it, and it just, even if you're like not, if you're a fan of classic rock, but you're like, I don't know, Van Halen. I mean, like, go back and listen to it, like, just for because they do a lot of covers in it, and it's like great, they're just killing it. And Pat Travers, and right, they do Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo and a bunch of stuff, and it's like, when he rips a solo, man, it's just perfect rock guitar playing. Like, and there's no whammy bar and no tapping, because it's like he's probably playing that old Flying V he had then or something. It's so good. I guess it would be a relatively new Flying V at the time, actually. It was 75, and it's like one of those 70s Vs. So, okay. Yeah. What else we got here? Lawrence says, times are not just great for having some quality choices in guitar gear, but also access to experience, critiques, and advice to help. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess it's mostly good. The only thing that I think is that sometimes, would we have, Richie Blackmore plugging into a tape deck into the front of an amp with that crazy, for boost, that kind of thing, if he had just had somebody on the internet to tell him to go get a Klon or something, and it made for unique sounds, I was even thinking with regards to the Tone X thing, it's like, the critique was that 80% of them are kind of crap on the in the browser, when you go listen to all the tones that people have uploaded to the browser, the captures. But the rest are good, and people were suggesting, well, just search by the most liked ones, and then only look at those. Like, use the criteria of, like, if it's got over 300 likes or whatever, then that's probably a good one, and download it. And I was thinking, that makes sense, the curation is probably going to have been done for you. But then you're going to end up with everybody with the same great tones, And I guess at the end of the day, musical ideas trump sound anyway. Like, if if whatever your songwriting ideas or whatever you're playing with, that's the most important thing, that you've got, a great sound to make music with. But you are going to end up with people with identical starting place as far as tone go, if everybody downloads the same things. So, but that's unavoidable, I guess, if I upload mine as a package, I guess I would want the most people to download it as possible, but then everybody's going to end up with my sounds, the way that I dialed them in from my, you know what I mean? So, it's a bit of a conundrum, isn't it? So it's important to make it unique. I guess once you add a pedal to it, if you stick a delay on it or a treble booster into it or something, then it changes the sound. So then you've done your own thing with it anyway. So yeah. All right. Anyone have significant ground loop issues when using the Fryette power station? I have an ISO transformer coming today. When do you find you get the ground loop? You shouldn't have a ground loop if you're just coming out of an amp into it and then coming out of it into a cab. I did have a bad set of tubes once. So if you're discovering that you've got a buzz or a hum, do you have a low hum, Stephen, that sounds like just coming through the cab that you can't seem to get rid of? Because that was tubes for me. And I actually had to get a new set of 6550s in mine. So, yeah. Okay, what else? What else you guys talking about? Oh, there's a super chat from Lamar Brewster. I have a Mesa Quad in your PT100 plug-in, Windows version. Would running the quad into the plug-in with the preamp off be a workable way of using the quad at home? Yeah, you can do that with the preamp off, the power amp sim on. I think you can do that in my plug-in. It's been a minute since I've done that, but I think you've got separate controls to turn off the pre and power. But anyway, yeah, even just into the speaker sim, Would it keep the analog feel? Pretty much. I mean, yeah, you can run it as a, uh, if you're running it in a unison slot on a UA interface, it's really low latency. So it'll keep a lot of feel. But yeah, you're running into a tube preamp. This avoids that analog to digital conversion before you're going into the amp sound, because you're obviously hitting your preamp first and generating the tone and then going into a computer just to add some power amp sim and impulse response. Another great, I'm glad you're using my plugin, but another great way to do this, I just discovered a really cool IR loader. It's the Nembrini one, and if it's still on sale, they were running a sale like 2 days ago, $19.95 on their website. Works really well. You can load up to 3 impulse responses. It's got built-in EQ, compressor, and a power amp sim. So you can pick EL34, 606, or EL84, I think, and dial in some. I think there's a resonance control or something. So it's or maybe I might be making that up, but I just got it, so I've just started using it the other day. But nice IR loader that you can use within a DAW, and you could also use that. So yes. Back end of the PT100 plugin will work great, but also there's this other thing that is maybe a little more, because of course then you can load in your own IRs into it and stuff, which you can't do on my plugin. You have to use my cab sims, but they're good, the ones in the PT100 plugin. So a couple different ways you can go. Yeah. All right. What else we got? How does the Tone X compared to neural plugins running at max settings on a high-end Mac? Does the Tone X feel and sound better? I don't know. I'd have to go and that's not a comparison I've done back to back. The neural plugins are great. They've got their own thing going for them. I love that. Talk about simplicity and getting a great sound quickly and then just getting on to playing. Neural plugins are fantastic for that because they're just so easy. They're so elegant the way they've laid out their interface. And it's the best looking plugins out there, I think. So, yeah. So, great advantages to neural plugins in that regard. You're not going to get lost down a rabbit hole of, just pull up a good preset and go kind of thing and play. But feel and sound better. The neural plugins once again are terrific. So they're going to sound great. They're easy to get a great sound. It's probably easier to get a crappy sound with the Tone X because there's so many bad captures. So, most of the ones that are factory ones, I'm not that crazy about. The appeal to these things, and it's the way I mainly use Quad Cortex, to be fair and stuff, is to be able to load my own amp sounds in. I don't use the models that much on these things. I do, my own amp things because I know exactly the way I like my amps to sound. I love my amps, and I've got a studio and mics and the ability to do the capture stuff and all that, load boxes. So I can dial in the sound exactly what I want, That said, there's some great ones out there. There's this dude, I'm going to forget his name right now. He sent me his, I could probably find it in my downloads folder here. Let me see. This fella sent me some captures, and he sells them for Tone X. Just one sec here. I'll take a look at my downloads folder. What was his name? Amalgam Audio. Amalgam. Amalgam Audio. So you'll find him on Instagram, and also, he's probably got a YouTube channel and stuff too. But man, his captures are good. And he sent me some Vox stuff that's like out of this world. He's got Marshalls and other amps too. In particular, his Vox captures are amazing sounding. Like just what you want a Vox to sound like. And he's got a couple IRs as well that, then you could add to other things if you need like a silver Alnicos and stuff that are like, that's just my favorite speaker for the old silver Alnicos for a Vox. Oh, they sound good. So got to give that dude props and really good stuff. So there's more opportunity to sound bad, I would say, with the Tone X, with sifting through captures and to get lost out in the weeds, but then there is with something like a neural plugin, which is just an instant, pull it up, very simple, sounds great, easy to use. There's a lot to be said for that, but both could be made to sound great. The gripe I always hear about emulation is that it doesn't cut through a live mix. Yeah, true. I've used both Valve and Digital Live and couldn't tell much difference. Well, the problem that a lot of people, and I was talking about this with Sir the other day, he was mentioning that when you listen to a lot of soloed stuff, be it Richie Blackmore, or like I brought up Blackmore on the tape deck. He goes, God, when you hear it, if you hear the isolated tracks, it's so nasty sounding sometimes. Like the way, he goes, you can hear the Akai tape deck or whatever in the front end of the amp just kind of spitting, and how it kind of collapses and stuff. And that's the way it sounds on the record. It's like, I learned many years ago through real amplifiers that I had an amp. Okay, I'll just tell you what it is. Bogner Ecstasy, one of the early ones. Great amp, really great, and it had a sound that, on the blue channel that I really liked, that blue Bogner, plexi setting. Coming out of the cabinet, a friend of mine said, that amp sounds like it's already been recorded coming out of the speaker cabinet. Like it's all dialed in and compressed and very nice coming out of the guitar speaker cabinet, Whereas if you plug in a real Marshall, it's like, a 67 plexi, for example, which was the first one that I ever got. It was a late 6700 watt. That was my first exposure to ever using one of those where I could really turn it up and listen to it. And I was like, oh my God, it sounds like the world's ending. It's so loud. It's out of control. It's wild, and realizing that but when you take that and you capture it with microphones in a nice room, and your playing reflects the wild sound, because it's like, holy shit, like it's, feeding back and just kind of crazy and so dynamic and everything. The difference between that and then trying to mic, say, the Bogner and get something akin, it sounds very dark in comparison and very tame. Great if you're practicing or doing, a low volume, or, even in rehearsals and stuff. I always had trouble making that amp sit in a mix. And as a matter of fact, when I moved to getting one of these in a band I was in, this is a King Royale, so a very different amplifier, but an AC30 style, very vintage. One of those into a 212. I moved to that from the Ecstasy in a band that I was playing in at one point. There was a great, there's a engineer, producer that was a friend of mine that was the bass player in the band. He's done a lot of big records since and stuff. He's a talented dude. He was the bass player, and he used to stand right beside me on stage. So one week I had the Bogner and a closed back 212 at the rehearsal. Next week I came with a combo version of a Top Hat King Royale. And he goes, it's great. Like, this is so much better. He's like, it's like you're not as loud, but you're louder. So I was out of his way sonically, but I had a more cutting, Vox, like AC30. It was like right there in that zone where it just sits, the guitar just sits in the mix and cuts through, and the bass is underneath with the cymbals on top and everything. Whereas, the darker, very full, darker Bogner thing just would get in the way of the bass and stuff like that. So not that it's a bad, the Bogner, the Ecstasy was a great amp. It was, for what it was, it's cool. It's a classic in its own right, but it doesn't sound wild like a Plexi. He went that way later on with the Helios and stuff. You can get those amps to sound much more akin to that. But it's an interesting thing, So cutting through in a live mix. Sorry, I get so out in the weeds sometimes, but this is what we do here. A lot of people with Axe effects and stuff, I find they set them too dark. So they'll pick there's a lot of IRs for the Axe effects that are dark, and they sound in there as you're paging through, once again, the thousands in there that are in an Axe effects, and setting up an amp model. A lot of people will dial it in to sound very pleasant. But traditionally, guitar sounds in a mix weren't that pleasant, was my whole point. They were pretty cutting or sometimes nasty. Sympathy for the Devil, Satisfaction, a lot of those tones that when we think of, Hendrix back in the day, or Richie Blackmore, even the sound I learned Burn recently, the sound on Burn, pretty gnarly, like, kind of very snarly and kind of upper mid, and there's nothing dark and mellow and pleasant about it, but in an exciting rock mix, the guitar just sits right. So I guess my point is, you can make a modeler sound like that. You just have to work at it a little bit, and you can definitely make it not sound like that and probably disappear in a mix. So, I'm thinking about going modeler for the first time, Fractal FM3. Any thoughts? That's probably the way I would go if you're going Fractal. It's the simplest one, and it's going to give you a good idea of whether or not, and I did some presets for it. Please download them. In particular, I really like my kind of like rock Marshall-y one that I did for the FM3. I think through having that, it's a great piece of gear, and through having that, you'll know whether or not that fractal ecosystem works for you. It's a very highly capable device, and you'll discover whether or not that's your jam. Been offered an XFX Ultra for 350 euros. See, they're inexpensive now, aren't they? Do I go with a new X MG30 or the XFX because it's XFX? I would say the XFX is still more probably a deluxe unit. The new X stuff is a little simpler in its a lot simpler when I think about the editors and stuff and its implementation and the way it's, and once again, you will know whether or not that's the ecosystem for you. I still find the older XFX, the UI is quite, on the unit itself is somewhat difficult to navigate. I find I push edit and then page to get into it. They've come a long way since then. I find the easiest way to use them is the editor, the computer editor. So I highly suggest if you get the Ultra to download the editor and use AxEdit with it, you'll discover it's a lot more fun that way, I think. So as to not go down that tech getting lost in menus rabbit hole, Yeah. So that'd be my advice. New X is nice. I've done presets for them and stuff and reviewed some of their products, but it's a little more, we're talking about a more simple, device that's for maybe younger players or I think, at least with the MG30. The XFX is a highly capable, yes, 10 years old, but at this point, it's a still fairly serious piece of rack gear, Yeah, I know. We got, who else here in the house? I just saw Brian Karstens. What's up, man? From Karstens Amps. Did a review of his amp a while ago, and he said, I believe he said, happy Sunday. There it is. Happy Sunday. Nice to see you, man. You make a nice amp. Vox AC30 versus Top Hat King Royale. The Top Hat King Royale was one of my favorite AC30 style amps. I haven't played a lot of boutique ones, to be fair, but it's the one that, for me, even out of newer AC30, sounds more like an old AC30 to me. Because I've got experience playing a couple really brilliant early 60s AC30s that I used a lot. Like Linda Perry had one that I used on a ton of recordings, and it was one of the copper panel ones with the added top boost on the back. And that amp haunts me to this day. The compression and the, just the way that thing sounded is imprinted on my brain. And these do a great, I bought that head for a reasonable price from somebody that was selling it when they closed their gear rental business. And I'm glad I got one because I had one 20 years ago and then I got rid of it. And it was like, I've always sort of regretted it. It's just a great AC30 is what it is. When you look at the circuit in the inside, Friedman's gone through it and stuff. So it's an AC30. That's what it is. It's a point-to-point AC30. So it's a terrific amp. Doesn't look like one, but it is one sonically. Probably more reliable too. The way he lays out its, because the way an original AC30 is done and stuff, I think they run pretty hot and kind of can be problematic and stuff. So that's nice. What's the green guitar at the back? It's a Jackson. It's one of those green Jacksons with a. Hey, Roger, what's up, dude? You want me to bring it over to England? Actually, I probably should, right? We should do like a hair metal song or something. Bring it over. Neck through style Jackson, How was Noodles? What's his rig like? So I was working for Offspring last weekend. His rig, so they use XFXs. XFX, I can't remember if it was an Ultras or 2s now. I think it's XFX 2 XLs. Is that right? Is that the model? And what they're doing is kind of actually using XFXs in a traditional amp-like way. So they're running currently XFXs into matrix power amps and then out into 412 cabinets. And both Noodles and Dexter use a 412, a mix of a Greenback Marshall 412 and a Mace V30 412. That's it. And so just, yeah. And it's interesting the way they dialed them in. I was speaking about you know, how you could dial in Axe-Fx dark and then it wasn't cut. They don't have that going on. They're using like, you know, a BE model and the treble's cranked up to like 8 on theirs, and you know, with the bass down around 3 or 4 and the mids somewhere around 4 or 5, something like that. So lots of cut going on, presence on like 5, and going into a matrix and real guitar cabs, and it's got a real, you know, they sound good like that. I mean, it's like, it's not a bad sound at all. Even on an older Axe-Fx, it sounds pretty amp-like. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think they got them originally for, you know, I think the thinking was that they would be consistent traveling around the world without voltage difference. You know, that you can use them in the, basically you call up the same sound. It's the same volume. It's the same everything. That was their thinking with going that route years ago. Probably largely a successful experiment, I would say. You know, it's interesting because I'm of the mind that, you know, if you in the big racks, lots of gear still because there's duplicates for everything. You're almost using a traditional amp rig at that point with, you know, cabs and everything. So I don't know if the one advantage, I guess, consistency. But to me, it was sort of like, I was just thinking you could go the amp route too, probably with good modern reliable amps, and have, just make sure you've got a backup and stuff, and you essentially have a similar weight rig. So we talked about all that. So you know, it's interesting, but they were great guys. Somebody said, "How did you enjoy working with them?" Super nice guys, nice hosts to hang with for the weekend. Lovely people. I quite like them. Dexter's a really interesting cat. You know, he's a jet pilot, and he's also an expert in, I believe he's got a PhD in, you know, something to do with vaccines. So he's he's not just a punk rock singer, guitar player in a band. Like, he can fly a you know, passenger, like a you know, at least I'm not sure about big jets, but small jets. He has his own jet. Wild, pretty cool. Fascinating, actually. Okay, what else we got here? Let's see. There's a super chat there. I'll grab that in just a sec. The Aura is really good. This is I'm way back in the chat, aren't I? I got to move down the chat. But the Aura is really good. This is the Fishman Aura system. But I found it's pretty tweaky. Takes a while to dial in the best sound. I agree. When I tried it on a guitar, I've got it built into a Gibson J180. And I found only just a few settings I liked, but they were good once I found a sound I liked. So it was a little tweaky. Yeah. yeah. Uh-huh. There used to be a plugin called Acoustic Woodworks, I believe, for UA. That was a similar thing where it applied IRs to the sound, and you could pick the type of guitar body, you know, Dreadnought or Jumbo or whatever, in the plugin. That worked pretty well. I don't know if they had great success with it as a product, but I thought it was cool, and I actually used it on a couple things over the years to fix things that were done, you know, with a poorly recorded piezo-style guitar sound, you know. And you could plop that pickup on the channel and get a pretty cool sound, you know. It was a good problem solver. Yeah, so that's similar to the Aura type system. What's your current favorite delay or delays, if you have any? Currently, I mean, on my board, I have an Echoplex, which I still love for Echoplex sounds, and I've got a Timeline. So I'm not using stuff that's that different than, you know, the stuff that's come out that I've really liked is the Andy Timmons Halo. That was a really terrific sounding delay. Really nice pedal. When I think about other ones, I'm looking around my room here if there's anything else that comes to mind. I mean, I still love the El Cap. The old Empress tape delay, that was great. The Sir Discovery, I think, is the greatest analog delay that's ever been made. Just because it's so tweakable, and it's brilliantly done. Kevin executed it really well. It's terrific. If you like analog Memory Man stuff, it puts everything else to shame, I think. It's got more headroom, and it just works great. So there's a few, and there's some other stuff coming out that'll be out soon that is very exciting that I can't tell you about, but there's some stuff coming down the road from different people that Ask me that question again in a month. Okay, Jason Carter says, a new for old question, been offered an XFX Ultra. Oh, I did this one already. Hey, thanks for the super chat, though, but I hope I answered your question. I think I did. Just got a Marshall 820 watt. Do 800 sound better with an overdrive or boost? Any recommendations for a little more? Yeah, the classic thing's an SD1, something like that, like a super overdrive or an OD1, the Boss super overdrive or the Waza. If you put the Waza into that, the yellow one, it'll be great for what you want. Because the problem with an 800, the other thing you could do is mod it. You could easily send it to somebody like Dave Friedman, and he'll do his 800 tweaks to it. Just ask him for a little more gain and to clean it up, like to make it a little more clear. Because the problem with them is always a little anemic and a little woolly, right? A little woolly. You want it to be a little tighter and chunkier. And it's like, God, if there was just a little more gain. Take the thing and put the preamp on like 6 or 7 and turn the master up to about 7, and then it'll roar and it'll sound amazing. But you can't really do that practically, right? So I would say either have Dave tweak it, or the budget version of having Dave tweak it is something like an OD1 or ST1. The Waza one will work terrific, to get it exactly. And that was exactly what a lot of guys did in the metal dudes or whatever, or hair metal dudes or whatever in the mid 80s. JCM 800s with the Boss in the front. I think that's the Vivian Campbell thing, right? Didn't he do that? Maybe Jake, because they lop off so much low end, those pedals, that it's perfect going into an 800, which is a little bloated in the front end. So you're adding gain, boost, little distortion, also cleaning up the lows. Yeah. It's not dissimilar to what a Tube Screamer does, but a little different and a little more. Did you ever release a signature, or would I ever release a signature single coil? Yeah, I would. I would love to work on that at some point. I just don't have I'm happy, to be honest, with the V63s in my guitar. So I don't know what I would do. I would have to, really think about it and figure out what I could bring, because I always want to do something a little different and bring something different to the equation, not just, it's the Pete Thorn signature pickup and you should buy it just because. Like, I want there to be a reason, to if I do something, not just to make money or something. I want there to be like, I have to be jazzed about it, like I have been about the Thornbuckers and stuff, and there to be a reason. The reason with the Thornbuckers was like, I've always found that you couldn't get a pickup set that sounded really balanced in the PAF thing that sounded like old PAFs, like where the, like the kind of almost veering into a little bit of single coil kind of character with the clarity in the middle position. And there just wasn't a lot of available sets that did that. Bridge could sound great, and then the neck would be a little dark, and the middle would be, it kind of sounds like it, but and then you play an old Les Paul and you're like, it doesn't sound like that, So we wound them up until we got there, I think, and that's why people like them, because it's like, this is, people seem to really dig them. So I would want there to be that level of, a purpose, I guess. Yeah. Did we discuss Michael Anthony's recent interview about plans coming up to release old Van Halen live concerts? I haven't heard that. I would love that. That'd be so cool. If there's some great ones from the 80s or something that could be remixed or mixed or whatever, and there was stuff out there we don't know about, that'd be awesome. Yep. How's your memory with retaining songs? Sucks. Yeah. Don't feel bad, dude. I have the exact same problem. You've forgotten more than you can recall. I totally agree. I got to go over them. They come back. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, even with my own songs that I wrote, like, I have to go over, and I can't play a lot of those songs. Like, I have to go and relearn them. And then I'm like, what did I do? And sometimes I'm like, how am I doing that? And then it's like, oh, there it is. Oh, and it's like a neural pathway in your brain goes whoop, and lights up, and you're like, and it's a really cool feeling. I love that feeling of like discovering, oh, that's what I did. And then the song kind of comes back in a faster way than it would learning a whole, somebody else's song from scratch. Your fingers just sort of go where they're supposed to go, and it's like, oh, and because you did it once. So it's almost like driving through a neighborhood where how did I get there? And you don't remember because you haven't been there for 15 years. And you're driving. Did I turn here or is it the next one? And then like you do it once. And you're like, oh yeah. I got it. Because somewhere I find that fascinating, like that. Our brains work like that. But yeah. Yeah. Okay. What else have we got here? I have a Seth Lever killer pickup, but I want higher output and a bit darker and meaner. New PT Alnico 2. Yeah, that'll probably get you there. It's really pretty similar. Just the wind is gonna, still be nice and open, but yeah, it'll be a little darker. Seth Lever's like 8.2 or 8.3, so it's considerably hotter. It's probably a good way to go, I would say, for you. If you were going to go Duncan, not to just be like a fanboy of my own pickups, if you're going to go Duncan, then the 78 would be the call. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Tony's suggesting that he's saying that I talked about the Nembrini IR loader does three feedback modes of EL34. Their sale ends today. Is that what it is? I thought it was 6L6 and EL30. I used it once. So, but this is this plug-in that's on for $19.95. It's a great IR loader that I found the other day. Nice EQ in it, compression, and a power amp sim. So if you're just running a preamp into your into an IR loader, it'd be a great way to go. You could even get, say, one of the Nembrini preamps. Like, don't they make a quad preamp sim? And I know they make a ADA one, MP2 or whatever it was called. You could get that and then run that into your Nembrini IR loader and add a power amp sim, and you'd have a full fake rig. Sale ends today, everybody's saying, though. NPR here says the sale ends today. So if you need a good IR loader, check that out. Nice deal. A nice deal. Let's see here. What else? What are you guys talking about? Sorry, just moving through the chat here. Moving through the chat. Okay. Any recommendations for step-up transformer to run 230 volt PT15 IR and Bella amps on USA power? I don't know too much about those, to be honest. Like, which are, it's something that I always leave up to the backline company to kind of figure out. So I don't have a information on which ones would be better than others, but I would just do a little research and stuff. I think they're all probably pretty similar. Yeah. I'm sorry, not my area of expertise, those step up or step down transformers when you're going from Europe to the US. Yep. Robbie says, as a front of house engineer, modeler guys tend to cut way too much high end from their unit. I'd rather them leave it relatively wide open. I can cut high end if I need to. It's hard to add when it's not there. 100%. We were talking about earlier why sometimes modelers don't cut through in the mix. I'll give you guys a tip for adjusting this stuff. Honestly, if there's a way, if you use a regular rig and then you're moving to a modeler for gigs and stuff, if there's a way to use your regular amps or regular amp rig and listen to it and then A/B with the modeler. So for example, the way that I've done it in the past is, say I've got a mic'd cab in another room or in a closet or whatever. I've got that rig up with my amp and an A/B box, one side going to that rig, and I'm listening through my studio monitors. And then the B side will go to the modeler, and I'll have that up, and I can literally 1-to-1 just kind of listen to the modeler and listen to my rig and go, oh, I'm not like tuning in just from like, oh, this is what I think sounds good sitting here in my room. I'm actually listening to a mic'd cabinet through studio monitors. That's pretty good real world end experience of what it would sound like into a recording rig or into a PA. You're hearing it come back through the speakers, and you're like, okay, you basically want to match. If you're happy with the way your amp sounds with a mic with a 57 on it, doesn't even have to be fancy miking. 57, somewhere off the middle, out into the paper a little bit, like a live situation would be. Listen to that, and then, or at least maybe have a recording of that, of your amp with that, And then you can reference that when you're setting up your modeler to make sure you're not too far out in the weeds. Because people, I guess I have a good reputation for getting guitar sounds and stuff and knowing about it, but I don't even think that I've got sometimes I need the reference. I need to go back and listen. What's the actual thing sound like? Oh, wow, I'm way off. Like that happens to me where you'll get into the, after hours of doing it and stuff, and you need to have a reference, of what's going on. I'll give you an example. Melissa Etheridge was this past year. She was for a long time using Axe Effects. When I was with her 10 years ago on tour, she was using a Bella with V30s in a 212 cabinet. Sorry, not a Bella, a Badger. Badger 35 was her amp. And she would use that, and she really liked her sound, I think, back then. And had a few pedals on stage and stuff. The Badger 35 and a 212 cabinet, and that was her tone. Now, years later, they kind of contacted me and said she's not happy with her sound. She's unhappy, and I'm like, "What's she doing?" Axe Effects. Okay, engineers many times push towards Axe Effects. They like the consistency. They like the no sound on stage. They like all these things, right? But one of the things that happens is it's really easy to screw up the sound. It's really easy to get away from what an actual amp with a mic on a speaker sounds like with an Axe Effects. There's a lot of options, and we get into that, what sounds good in in-ears, That's the other thing, was she wasn't happy with the sound in her ears. So then she's like asking for different things. Well, if you guys know, many times people aren't happy with the sound, even if it's a great mic'd amplifier in ears, So it's a difficult thing. You don't want to chase down that rabbit hole. You want to, in my opinion, I have a strong opinion about this, you want the sound to be great in the front of house. That's the most important thing, what the crowd is hearing. If you nail that and get that to be just perfect without the front of house guy having to do a ton of EQ or anything like that, like just sounds, that's a great guitar sound now in the PA. Now, work with that at the monitor desk or whatever you've got to do. Maybe your in-ears are the problem, the brand because a lot of in-ears have too much low end and not enough clear top end. So it's like work with the monitor engineer then to take that sound that is now great in the PA and make that work for you on stage. Don't tune the sound to your in-ears, and make it, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. I have a very strong opinion about that. It makes sense, right? Like, now you're giving the front of house guy something that you tweak to work with your whatever brand in-ears and who knows how much high end you've lost over the years in your hearing and stuff. The most important thing is that the crowd hears a great sound, and then you build around that, So anyways, I'm just of the mind that you gotta have that reference of a great amp. If you're going to use it, you can really do good. And, the Offspring is a pretty good example. They had their Axe Effects and real cabinets and stuff. And basically, you wouldn't, I don't think, if you're in the crowd and you wouldn't know they're using Axe Effects the way that they were using them and stuff. It sounded good. I'm not criticizing the device. I'm criticizing the way that some people try and implement it, and the way that as a human being you can just kind of try and dial it in to sound really pleasant to you when you're sitting there at low volume or something. But that isn't what an amp does, and it's not the sound we're used to coming through a PA and stuff. So you end up working backwards from, just like this fella said, just like Robbie said, I can cut high end if I need to. It's hard to add when it's not there. It never sounds the same. It never sounds right. So it's an interesting thing trying to do this. Things used to be a lot easier, man. I'll say that. When your guitar player either had a Fender Super Reverb or a Marshall JCM 800 or a Plexi and a 412 cabinet, and that was the rig, with a few effects, and it was always that. Everybody, every guitar player in every band, it kind of had an amp and you threw a mic and it sounded good, and it sounded like rock music, through the PA, because that's just what stuff sounded like. Now there's all this stuff where you can get in and, you got all these options, Be basically like, yeah, you understand what I'm saying. I don't need to go on and on about it, right? The kind of tones you make when you tweak your amp halfway through the session after the top end and your hearing is gone. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. When I get into the menus on an old Axe Effects, I get scared I'll find a hidden setting asking me if I want to launch the missiles. Exactly. Do you want to play a game? 100%. Okay. Oh, look. Want to play a game? We're on the same page. We're all from the 80s, aren't we? People that grew up in the 90s, they don't know what we're talking about. Let's keep it our own little old guy secret. Let's see. I had the same issue with the power station when going boss ES8. What are you guys talking about? Yeah, I'm going to eventually gave it up and I got a PT15IR. I just like the last sentence. That's the most important thing. Fantastic. This is what we made the PT15IR for. This was everything that we're kind of talking about was like, look, let's incorporate some of this tech that allows people to go direct and get a great sound. Very, they want an Axe Effects thing. They want no volume. They can have that. They can have a little volume too. They can plug it into a cab if they want. 15 watts. Nobody wants loud stays these days, it seems. So we'll give them a compact amp with some IRs, but it's hard to get a bad sound, really, like a terrible sound, Sure, you can make it sound bad, I guess, but put all the knobs on 5, plug it into the PA, and plug in a guitar, and it basically sounds like guitar, good guitar. Yeah, that's great. That's, that was the goal with the thing. I'm looking at it right now. Oh, you look so nice. Very proud of it. I think it turned out really good. Oh, what do you think about the Morgan AC20 amp? I've played very few Morgans. Pretty cool. I think it's basically like it's an AC30 style circuit, but the Brilliant, right? It's not a top boost, right? It's I think if it's the one I'm thinking of, I thought it was good. It was a very simple, very simple amp. The only one I know that was really using a lot of the Morgans and stuff was Josh Smith, and he used more Fendery ones. So, but I did play that AC20 once. I remember it was like a non-top boost, very simple AC30 style amp, and it's it was a good sound. What's the best radius for a fretboard? There is no best. If I had to pick one for all people, it would be a 9.5 to 12 compound. Because you basically get the. This is specifically on a Fender style guitars. Let's say bolt-on necks. 9.5 to 12. If we had to only have one, that would satisfy the vintage guys. It would be flat enough down in the upper regions, the nether regions of the neck to satisfy shredders. It kind of feels like a great cross between, vintage and modern. The 10 to 14, which is on my signature guitar stuff, very comfortable. I like it. Decidedly a little more modern. Doesn't really feel vintage Strat. 7.5, a lot of people really like, like John Mayer, obviously, or, it's a vintage Strat. You're not going to get, the shredder guys aren't going to be happy with 7.5, though. Other players, sure, so that's why I say 9.5 to 12, great compound, Now, on a Les Paul, doesn't feel right to me if they're too flat, I've discovered. So I kind of I believe Gibson used 12, I think, straight 12. It just feels right on a Les Paul to me. If they're too flat, they feel weird. It doesn't feel like a Gibson style guitar to me, So it's strange. So I'm not a big fan of compounds on those. I think it's a straight 12 is what, or is it 10? What was the radius on a Les Paul? I went through this because I remember when John did prototypes of the Aura, they made some, and the initial one felt too flat to me, and it was one of the recommendations I made. Gibson I'm interested now. Les Paul radius, 12 inches. Yep, it's a 12. I was right. So straight 12 feels really good. Anything sort of flatter than that feels kind of weird to me. So that's what it says here. Let's see. There's a bunch of. It's interesting. There's all kinds of charts on the. Standard radius is 12 inches for almost all their guitars. Gibson. Interesting. I guess I knew. I didn't even have to look. All right. Moving down through the chats. How's the weather in LA? Has it stopped raining? Yeah, it stopped raining, but it's going to rain this week. It's actually going to get a little cold this week in LA for like just a few days, and then by next weekend it's warming up again. So, but it's supposed to rain midweek, Thursday, I think. Slime Green Jackson in the background. Indeed, there is. there is one back there. It's true. It's one of those slime green kind of matte finish ones. It's fun. Let's see. Do you need to read music to be a studio musician? I think so. Not like if you're really serious about, I want to be a studio musician, like that's going to be my career, and I'm going to get all types of studio musician gigs. Everything from going in to play with producers on stuff for rock bands to film sessions. Those you're going to read on. The other stuff maybe not so much, but you got to be ready. You can't go in and the music pop down in front of you. You're like, I don't. So if you were serious about being a studio musician, you better have some, at least, I would say, mid-level reading skills. I wouldn't even say rudimentary. I'd say you should probably practice reading. Charts, for sure. Gotta be able to do charts, make your own, as well as read charts that somebody's done for you. In my experience, if you want to be a serious studio musician. Now, you might find a studio musician gig where, what do I mean by this? I'll explain in a second. You might find yourself in a position like I did when I worked for Linda Perry for a couple of years. It's not necessary. You might find a few producers that, I would say Phil X. I don't know if he reads, and he worked for Howard Benson and others. And that, to be fair, the kind of things you're going to hire Phil to do, he's going to be very upfront about, obviously you get him for the Phil X thing, so that's a different thing than what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about, you want to have a comprehensive studio career, a Dean Parks kind of thing, a guy that is known, like I'm Tim Pierce, Tim Pierce for sure. I haven't even talked to him about this, but Tim can read. I know he can read, He might not be like a monster reader like some of the guys that he would cite, but for sure he's going to be able to walk in, read charts, and read, if there's lines written out and stuff, he's not going to have a problem with that. Pretty sure about all that, So it was never my goal. All these years down the road, like, kind of wouldn't mind putting some time into reading. My way of working on reading was actually I bought these simple classical guitar books, and I would sit there and read that. That was kind of a cool way to work on reading. I'm talking basic, level 1 simple, to kind of work on. But guitar, I always found a very difficult instrument to read on. I used to be able to read okay on violin and also on clarinet, which I played in the school band in junior high. Decent, I could read, but there's only one note at a time on those instruments. So it's like reading chord stacks was always the tough part for me. Anyways, what is the best favorite amp you ever played through? I can't pick a favorite, but I would say that I can pick a top, like the ones that really stick in my head, and then also my core kind of like home base is always that sort of 68 plexi, be it 50 or 100 watt. They both do a little different thing, but that sound is something I could probably live with forever and tweak and make it work. They're quite a versatile amp for what they are. For example, I was doing some captures of my 72 Marshall up there, which is basically, that's the amp I'm talking about. And they do one thing when you put them on 7 on the treble channel. They do the Van Halen thing when you put them on 10. And then they do a completely other and really beautiful thing if you run the tone controls quite low and jumper the channels and use primarily the channel 2, the normal channel, and then just blend in the bright treble channel just a little bit with the jumper cable. It's a different sound, and it's great with single coils and playing Strat stuff, and it's a beautiful Marshall clean, just kind of when you want to do that, Hendrixy thing or what. Not that Hendrix uses like that, I don't have any idea, but how he set his amps when he was doing stuff. But that's that. If I'm going for that sound, I remember lending that amp to David Grissom once, and when it came back, it had the controls set a certain way. It had the normal channel on about 3, the bright channel volume on about 1.5 or 2, and then it had all the tone controls below half. And I was like, that's really interesting. And I plugged in a jumper cable and I listened to it, and it sounded great. It was like, wow, I don't really use them like that. But it was like when you turn the mids way down and when you turn the presence down, it tends to drop the gain a lot because the EQ on a Marshall Plexi or 4-hole Marshall is lossy. So you're subtracting gain and cleaning up the amp when you run the tone controls down really low. And it's still plenty bright, because if you've got a bright cap on your Marshall, if you didn't take it off, that channel 1 just blended in a little bit that normally would sound so ice picky and crappy on its own. When you're using primarily the normal channel, which can be kind of dark, it's dark and a little woolly, clean, and then you blend in just a little of that treble channel, it's like there's all the sparkle. It sounds amazing. So that's a great way to use them, and that's is why I'm saying, long-winded once again, like I can be, but my favorite amp like that I can get a lot of places with a 4-hole Marshall that is set up the way I like them to be, and when they're well maintained and sounding great. Other amps that come to mind as some of my favorites that I mentioned earlier, a copper panel AC30 that had the added top boost on the back. That's just a brilliant sounding amp for a lot of stuff. I love a nice super reverb. I did a video on one, my Amps in the Zone, that you can hear that for what they do, or watch that video for what they do. That's a great sound, a 410 super. And then other ones that stick in my mind are that train wreck that I had here to do a video of. That was unbelievable. It was a Liverpool. Just an incredible sounding amp, like incredible sounding amp for so much stuff. All round, the PT100 is like, I could probably do the rest of my, days with one of those and have a whole career of guitar sounds and not need anything else, It's such a versatile and powerful and great machine, great clean sound, and does so much stuff. So, what else? Other amps that come to mind. Those are really the ones that, that stick in my mind. That copper panel AC30, great late 60s Marshalls, which, not picking one in particular, I've played a ton, that if they're set up right, they sound amazing. Nice super reverb. Yeah, basically you got your flavors there: Fender, Vox, Marshall, and then a modern thing, PT100. And then there's a lot of other amps that have their place. I think a SLO is a great amp. It's got its own kind of grindy, big grain distortion thing that they do. Other heavy amps that I played there, original Block Logo 5150, which I had. That's a great metal amp. Yeah. Okay. Doesn't Bruce Dickinson have a pilot's license? Yeah, he flies commercial jets. That's true. That is true. Would you place a preamp pedal before or after your drives? I don't know the Clover, but it just depends what you want. If you want to saturate the sound and get more gain, then you put it before. If you want a volume bump, you put it after. So if you need to lift for solos, but you don't necessarily need more distortion, that's the putting it after. Although you probably will get a little more distortion because it'll kick the front end of your amp a little harder, so it'll distort the amp a little. But if you really want, in front of the pedal, you're going to go into the pedal and it's going to hit the pedal and distort the pedal circuit and give you more sustain without really adding volume. So yeah. A lot of people will do a clean boost like at the end of their chain for a volume bump, and then they'll have their, various drives that they stack in the middle. That's a pretty common way to do it. The clean boost at the end gives you the volume bump. Yeah. Jason says, I can't remember what we talked about, but he says, perfectly answered. Thanks, Pete. You are welcome. Hey, we got 414 people online, like an AKG 414. What does that have to do with anything? I don't know, but great to have y'all here. Do you run your effects in parallel or series? Generally, series. But that doesn't really tell the whole story. If I'm recording and I'm adding delay, to a recording. So, for example, what you hear me do on YouTube, and I'm playing a solo and there's delay, it's in parallel because it's like I'm doing it in the mix. So you're hearing me with a send coming out of the channel, getting, it's still 100% dry, and then the return's coming up with the delay on it, and that's not got any dry mixed in. So that would be in parallel. So if we're talking live, generally everything's in series. One of these days, I'd love to get a little more into having using something like, because I have one here, the Musicom Lab parallelizer that would allow me to do, effects in parallel. The problem I always run into is there's going to be some stuff I want to do in series. With the parallelizer, I could use one half of my, so I have an H90 now on my board, and I have a timeline delay. I could run the timeline delay in parallel, no problem, and feel good about it. But it has an analog dry path anyway. So still might be cooler to run it in the loop of, as far as tone purity goes, in the loop of the parallelizer, maybe a loop. The H90, I could run one side of it, because you can separate the two processors in it. I could run one side of it in the parallelizer and do parallel stuff. And then the other side I could use as maybe the first effect in my post effects chain. And use, the problem is with parallel, like if you want to do, for example, rotary, and you want 100% wet because you want the full Leslie effect, you don't want the dry signal mixed in, which it never would be in a Leslie. If you're plugged into a Leslie cabinet, you're getting 100% of the rotating drum and whatever, right? Could it still sound good in parallel? Sure, but it's not authentic. So I always run into that. Like, well, if all my effects are set up parallel, then I'm not going to be able to do certain things. Another one's tremolo. If you're going to run a tremolo in an effect loop, you'll never get 100% wet. You know, if you really want to do a hardcore stutter, impossible, because you'll have 50% of the sound will be your dry signal, even if the effect's at 100% wet and you're blending it in a lot. You're still going to have that dry in there. So there's some effects. EQ is another one. If you want to really, you know, lo-fi your sound for a kind of a certain part or certain things, you don't want your dry signal mixed in with an EQ. So there's certain sounds that you need in series, you know, so that you can set them to be no dry sound. So why not the Friedman BEOD for a JCM 800? Well, you could use a Friedman BEOD with the JCM 800, but if you were going to do it, I would recommend going into the low gain input and setting the amp up kind of clean, a la, you know, like a Billy Corgan kind of thing, where you use the JCM 800 as a clean platform. The reason is because the BEOD is kind of a hard clipping distortion pedal, and you don't want to pile that into a Marshall sound that's already distorted. It's not going to sound great. It's not, the pedal was designed to do all the preamp gain. So a JCM 800 benefits mainly from hitting it with a boost or an overdrive that just adds a little bit of soft clipping overdrive to the sound. It's not necessarily going to work great with a hard clipping distortion. Now, your mileage may vary. You might run a DS1 into a JCM 800 and get a sound that is really cool if you set it a certain way, and depending on your pickups and how you play and what you want and all that stuff, because there's no rules in any of this stuff. But for the most part, distorted pedal into distorted amp, no good. Overdrive pedal or boost into distorted amp, good. That's the common way of thinking. Distortion pedal, hard clipped into clean amp, good. That's why low gain input on the JCM 800 with fuzzes, distortions can be great. Can Dave Friedman turn a Marshall into a Jake E. Lee kind of amp? Indeed he can. Yeah. He makes a Jake E. Lee amp, so he knows. And indeed, he did a mod when I was in his shop last week where a guy had sent in an amp and he said he's going to do a Jake E. Lee kind of thing to it. So that's a thing that he does. Is the clipped bright cap in your SL68 more Van Halen-like? Why do you prefer it? I don't have that, actually. I have a switchable bright on my SL68 now where I can do 100 PF, 4700, or no bright cap on the switch. Now, Van Halen, for Van Halen, it makes absolutely no difference, because once you get that volume 1 up above 8 or so on, like Van Halen would run it, super high. If not on 10, probably I doubt he ever turned it down below 8. It's probably mostly on 10. So he would say, you know, that he would turn things up past the limit and then just back it down a hair. I believe there's sounds where he wasn't running the amp on 10. Because it just sounds like in some of the recordings that the amp isn't on 10 to me. Some people are like, a Plexi doesn't have enough gain. I'm like, a Plexi has more than enough gain, and actually sometimes too much gain for some of the sounds that I hear in recorded Van Halen. Could he just be rolling down the guitar? Sure. But I think it sounds to me like a lot of times the guitar is, you know, wide open, and the sound just has a lot of volume, and maybe the amp's on like 8.5. Anyways. Point is, he's got it up loud. Once you get that volume up above 8 or so, you don't really hear the bright cap anymore. Because what the bright cap's doing is it's letting everything above a certain frequency through that pot. So when it's down on 0, 1, 2, 3, you know, a bunch of top end is getting through, just getting let through the pot, right? And depending on the value of that bright cap, that's the frequency above which the top end is getting through. So if it's a 4700, it's down into the upper mids almost. And upper mids through treble is all getting through. If it's 100 PF, just the presence stuff is getting through. We're super highs, right? So that's what we're talking about here is, you know, with no bright cap, nothing's getting through. And that's why it sounds darker and more even all the way through the range of the pot. With 4700, a lot is getting through. And what's happening is you're blending in the rest of the signal. So more and more lows and mids are coming through the more and more you turn up that pot. Once you get it all the way up to 8, almost everything's getting through. And, you know, you're hearing less and less the effect of the bright cap because now you've got full frequencies are almost getting through. So this is why on 10, it's the same. You don't hear a bright cap. You know, turn on the bright switch on any Fender or, you know, a bright cap on a Marshall, pull it in, pull it out of the, you know, just you can disconnect one lug off the you know, on the volume pot that's connected to. You will hear no difference. A little bit of difference below 8. Now more. The more you turn it down. That's why the magic for me with a 4700, a big bright cap is like on 7 or 6.5, right around there. All those highs are getting through, but you've mixed in enough of the lows and stuff, but not too much to where it's getting bloated and loose, and you get that because all that bright's getting through, but there's lots of lows and stuff getting through too, but just enough to keep the sound tight. That's the magic of a plexi with the big bright cap on like 7 or so. And it just sounds like vicious and awesome and tight and great and killer. If you don't have the bright cap in and it's on 7, it's sort of similar and still pretty cool, but you've attenuated some of that high stuff that was getting let through by the bright cap. And, you know, now it's this even frequency and it's not as aggressive sounding. So, yeah, it's not as teethy. Okay. I wish I knew more about amps. That'd be dangerous if I knew more about every part of an amp besides just bright caps. I do. I know a little bit about other things, but, you know, I want to get more knowledge about exactly what's going on with, you know, every stage of what's happening in an amp so that I can speak about it with some sort of authority. Sean says, rate the JJ100 clean channel. How different is it than your PT? I have no idea. Don't know that much about the clean on a JJ. That's his right, the Alice in Chains, Mr. Cantrell, his amp. I don't know what he's doing, if it's a Fender style clean or not. I know in the Stevens amp, it's basically a Fender style clean. Steve Stevens. I think the JJ is a simpler. Does it have as many controls? I'm just not sure, but I can't. It's not like sometimes. And I'm sorry, you've sent me a super chat, so I should have a better answer for you. But I can ask Dave, like exactly what's going on with it. But in order to feel like, once again, like I've got an educated answer, I would literally have to put them beside one another and play with them both for 20 minutes, you know, in the two clean channels, like in A/B them, and say, okay, now I know. I can tell you exactly what I hear, you know. Okay, Jason says the world needs Pete Thorn online guitar courses. When are they coming out? So, Guitario it's on their site now as coming soon. It's not out yet, but with Guitario, I've got an online course coming out that I hope you guys will like, and it's should be out. I mean, it's very, very late. They were supposed to put it out in October of last year, so we're getting into, you know, I'm not sure what's taking so long, and we're about 9 months at least, right, beyond what when it was supposed to come out. But it's on their site now. If you go to Guitario, literally as it sounds, Guitario.com, you'll see that it's listed as coming soon under the artist roster. So it's, last I heard, they're just editing, and I'm waiting to see, you know, edits, and hopefully it's cool. I'm sure it will be. They do good work. Seen Andy Timmons using SL68. I noticed that as well, playing brilliantly. God, he's good. Makes me sick how good he is. No, I'm happy for him that he's that good. What would be your overdrives of choice for a small pedal board where you're showing up and using middle of the road clean backline amp? Depends on the gig. I think that you want something that you can tune to different amps. So one of the if you want the most tunable, something from Origin, you know, something like a Revival Drive for a Marshally thing. If I'm going to use backline amps, that's a consideration, because now it's like I might end up with an AC30 one day and a JCM 800 the next day and a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe the next day. So I'm going to want something that I can tune to the day. And I can't think of one that's probably more tunable than something like an Origin Revival Drive. They really have given you a massive range in there. Now, a BEOD has a pretty good, for if you're playing hard rock or rock and you need a good rock sound, between the presence and treble, it's got a pretty wide range in there too, where you can tune it in. Just Origin's very sophisticated with the switching and the way, you guys know what I'm talking about. If you've got any other drive pedals, they've got that switch that lets you really it's basically tuned to, like, for if you're running into a flat power amp and cabinet, or if you're running into a front end of a Marshall or front end of a Fender, it's got different settings on the little toggle there, and then a pot that lets you kind of trim the top end so that you can really dial in the pedal going into different things, different amplification circuits. Okay. Yeah. What else we got? Let's see. I'm gonna go down in the chat because I'm pretty far back. I'll just grab a few on the way here. What would you recommend first pedal in the signal chain? Flanger before distortion or after? I run my flanger in front because I'm like a Van Halen nut. So first pedal in the signal chain for me is, I guess, my freak out. That's a feedback pedal. But that's because I want to run it right after the guitar in order to grab notes. It's not a common pedal maybe to have, although it's a great pedal. What else is on my board early on? I mean, I got a Unit 67 boost way up front. That's just for, if I just want more, I can just kick that. It's not in a loop on my switcher or anything. It's just like, that's my pedal to hit for, I need more. Quick, hit that. Great. Compressor, always early in the chain. Fuzz, generally speaking, just after that. Yeah. Were you ever a hair metal dude? What do you mean? Did I like it or did I do it? I had a pretty good mullet by about 1991. I wouldn't say I was ever a hair metal dude, although I was into, I liked the bands of the day. Like, I was totally into Van Halen, and I was totally into, they're not hair metal, but I mean, I guess there's some crossover there. Dave Lee Roth. Van Halen lives in its own distinct place in rock history. But I liked Rat, and I liked, I don't know, what were some of the bands I really liked? I thought Reb was amazing in Winger, his guitar playing. And some of the songs were great. I mean, melodically and stuff, like really well written. I think that, who else? I mean, I loved Whitesnake. Loved John Sykes era Whitesnake. And even when they got new guys in the band, and it wasn't like, it was still like, yeah, I mean, I like that stuff. I really, really liked that era of the band though. Like the Sykes, he was just like the coolest guitar player to me for that style of, he was so fiery and like just burning, that's some like cool European, classic shred kind of guitar playing in a great way. So I liked that stuff. But I missed I was a little young. I mean, I got to LA in 90 and I was 19, and, so it was all over by 92 or so. Although I got to experience the whole Sunset Strip thing and everything as it was still happening in 90, 91. But I didn't like it from the perspective of, by then it was starting to eat itself, I think. And it felt very kind of just, like, I mean, the ads in the paper, the Recycler at the time for guitar players for bands were like, we're going to take it all the way to the limit, to the top. Need guitar player to, like, lock it down. Like, no MI posers, no blah, blah, blah. Like, must have long hair. Must have, like, it was very like, it just felt very like, okay, this is for trying to be sort of, like, it felt very formulaic by that point, right? Which we saw. I mean, the songs were about partying and chicks and whatever, and they had to have a guitar solo, and all three guys would jump off the drum riser at the same time, and the, spandex pants, and the whole, like, it was like, by the time it was like, you knew something was wrong, even at 19, 20 years old. I was like, it's just fun. Like, it's sort of fun. There's a fun element. I'd stand back and look at it and go, but this isn't quite like Van Halen, like, to me, like the depth of the music and the playing. Because sometimes people lump Van Halen into that. Oh, it's just party music. It's like, yeah, give me a break. Like, go listen to little guitars and tell me it's just like, like that was getting lost a little bit in all of that. And I was like, well, this has nothing to do with that. And I had an awareness of that. They're appropriating things that Van Halen and, bands came up with in the late 70s, early 80s. It's getting appropriated, and then they're just doing a lowest common denominator sort of shtick of all of that, like by 90, and it's getting very dumbed down and very, and there's not the sophistication there, of what was happening with Van Halen music, because it was sophisticated, Eddie's music was, so I was very aware, of that. So that's what I was really into, was that stuff. And then I was also very aware of like, Satriani was coming out, Steve Vai was coming out. It was a really interesting time in guitar. Eric Johnson, who wasn't a hair metal guy, but he made great guitar music. Somehow a lot of that that got lumped into the hair metal thing, though, just because of the fashion of the day and stuff, And I guess Steve was in, Whitesnake and David Lee Roth and whatever, and so it was kind of like, but he was obviously so much deeper. So that's why those guys survived, coming out of, some people survived, like when The Extremist came out, that Satriani album, I think it did quite well. It maybe didn't do what, Surfing with the Alien did, which was a really big seller. But it did well. And Passion and Warfare was I think it's platinum. It was a huge album. So, Extremist came out around 92, I think. And so we're already into grunge and stuff, but it was just great sounding guitar music. It was really well recorded and produced by Andy Johns, and just had a great sound to it. So Joe was fine, and he sailed through the 90s, and so did Steve Vai, and so did, all the guys that were rooted in with their feet on the ground and with the good music sort of basis for what they did, beyond the fucking beyond the fashion or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. I'm just trying to say, like, it was like they made it through. And then you had Dream Theater, Images and Words came out, and that was obviously like, okay, well, this is like metal prog, with shredding guitar playing. And they have long hair, but it's like, who cares? Like, it was like, yeah. So that was a really another. Am I too long-winded sometimes? You're just making me think, am I a hair metal guy, or was I ever? It's like, I could differentiate the surface stuff from the stuff that actually have musical, interesting depth to it and stuff, Great. And the great soul, too, not just like tapping or whatever, dumb soul, it was like Warren, even in the context of Rat, which was pretty hair metal, Warren had amazing phrasing. And you could tell that his roots were in, the right places, George too. I mean, George Lynch had really interesting phrasing and really musical what was going on. Even if I was like, I don't like the lyrics or something of a song, but what was happening with the guitar was really deep still. Like, I guess that's, yeah. So I was always differentiating that, Any word on when the next PT amp is coming? I'm going on Tuesday to SUR to have a meeting, and we're going to nail down some stuff. And I'd like to nail down kind of a schedule, and also just kind of all the design and stuff. Back, to be honest, when the PT15 came out, around this point of the year, previous to it being introduced at NAMM, I went out for a meeting, and I tried to kind of nail down what we were doing, I guess. And it was good, I think. And we had a great meeting, and then the amp moved forward, and it was good. So I felt the need to do that again this time. And so I'm having a meeting on Tuesday, and we'll talk about it. And hopefully my wish is that the same sort of timeline will come out of that, and that January seems like a nice time. Might be wishful thinking, but I would love for that to happen, that we could have something for, say, the next NAMM time. That would be wonderful. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that would be my, I'll push for that and ask if that's possible. And if the interest is there and whatnot, Yeah, it's always a collaboration, these things. And of course, they've got other things on their plate and things that they're doing and stuff, so just to make sure that the bandwidth is there. That's the truth. Todd Roy says, why do sound engineers get so much say in these things? A musician is an artist, and they should have the say. No one should tell Rembrandt what brush or canvas to use. Well, that's an interesting thing. So we're talking about earlier things like Axe Effects and modelers and You want to, I mean, to be fair, I mean, you want to trust your team, and everybody's got to say, and everybody's got to, if they've got a valid point with using a certain piece of gear. For example, many things are generally left up to them, like what kind of microphones are on the cabinets. Now, if you're Eddie Van Halen or something, you might say, no, we're using 57s, But if a certain engineer wants to use a certain thing because they get a great result with it, I will listen to that and be like, well, many times I'll say, can you show me in the PA? And then I'll go listen. And for the way they work, it might work great. The certain console they use, other things that are in their signal chain, I remember an engineer wanting to use Palmers. That was a big one for me. Speaker sims in the PA. I've got these great cabinets with nice speakers in them, and I'm using divided by 13s at the time, nice amps. And I'm like, Palmer? I'm like, they sounded kind of MIDI and flat to me, as a speaker sim, analog speaker sim. And this was this great sound engineer named Michelle that I ended up doing two tours with, both with Jewel and with Melissa Etheridge, and she was terrific. And she's, well, come out and listen in the PA, which I really appreciate, when they're not just like, hey, leave that up to me. If they're like, well, come out and listen and see what you think. And I went out and listened, and lo and behold, in the PA, the way she was using the Palmer, it sounded brilliant, So I was like, oh. And she was like, yeah, you see, here's the microphone, and here's the Palmer. And, whatever she was doing with EQ, it sounded really present in the PA. And then you're getting a bit of the room of a venue anyway, because there were a lot of, depending on the venue, mixed in, right? And it just sounded so in your face and clear in the PA. In my in-ears, it sounded sterile, but in a room, it worked. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I can get with that. And then I used the microphones on the amp still on stage for my in-ears because that sounded better to me. Fine. One of the greatest live guitar sounds I've ever heard, in recent years, especially for hard rock, was Tom Abraham mixing Alice in Chains. He's a great sound engineer. He used Palmers. Now, I know he did a lot of processing after the Palmer on the channel, his own EQ and stuff to make it sound good. But both Jerry and Williams' guitar sounded really good in the PA. And I remember the bass sounded incredible, too. And I think he was using maybe on that as well, some sort of speaker sim or whatever in the PA. And it just sounded crushing, like a really great guitar sound in the PA. I would have been like, Palmer, really? But it sounded really great. So all these factors come into play, man. You got to listen to everybody. And it's always best in the situations to give everybody their due credit. I'll give you an example. Last weekend when I was out working with those fellas, there was a lot of suggestions. I was making suggestions, but I tried to be very careful in making my suggestions to have respect for everybody there, because you got a lot of people in a camp like that have been there for a long time, and they do things a certain way, and you can't just come in and be like, well, why are you doing that? That's dumb. Or, like that wouldn't be appropriate. You got to come in and go, deferring to you with all respect, for what you're thinking. There might be a different way, and this would be the way I would suggest. But obviously, you've got concerns that have formed your opinion around this thing, and I respect that 100%. And there's no one way to, there's many different ways to get a guitar sound, right? So just offering opinions and saying, well, you might want to try this. And actually, my suggestions at the end of the day in that situation for that band were to come and listen to some different options. And then your own ears will tell you, as the artist, you're the boss, you want to make a good decision. So I would suggest that we set up A, B, and C for you, and we do a direct A, B, and then it becomes or ABC, and then it becomes very clear what the way that you should go. Also factoring into account, cost, reliability, all that stuff. Take it all into consideration, and then just make a decision moving forward based on that, So... you guys know, as a, you guys ask me a lot of questions about gear and when we do this Sunday Live, which delay, which whatever. But you guys know and this is part of why you ask me, because it's hard for some people sometimes to be able to compare everything. You don't want, you can't spend the money to get everything. You can't. So maybe somebody else has an opinion, on which pedal is better, this one or this one, which model is better, this one or this one. So I understand why we do it. At the end of the day, I still believe you guys would be the ones with the best answer. If you guys listen to, you know what you like, and when you A/B one thing against another and have a chance to try it, you're going to be the best judge of what's right for you. And then based on your budget as well, and based on, many other factors. So it all, if we can, I guess what I'm saying is if we can try things for ourselves, it's always the best way, you know? Yeah. When you use a digital delay, like what is on the H90 versus an analog, like the Sur Discovery, or when do you use, sorry, it's a question. When do you use a digital delay, like what's on the H90 versus an analog, like the Sur? I was talking about this with Friedman the other day because he was saying that he's not really a big fan of analog. He likes tape delays and digital delays. An analog delay is darker than either of those. Going to tend to be a little more murky. So your traditional, Boss or an Memory Man, they tend to be darker. And they tend to sound best, in my opinion, run in front of an amp. So when we think of the great analog delay uses, the Edge would be number one, right? Of building a whole, style around almost. And that was a Deluxe Memory Man. So, yeah, in front of an amplifier that's not too dirty, because the nature of an analog delay is that it's dark. Generally, they're dark. Even on a Sur, they're you can get probably more top end out of the Sur than a lot of analog delays and more headroom and all that. Still, to me, probably the right delay usage for the Sur is in front of an amp that's not too distorted or too an amp with some clarity. They tend to work good, and by clarity I mean both the tone and also the level of distortion. Because if you send too much analog delay into it, it's going to turn into muck. Which maybe that's a good sound for the part you're going for, but. Yeah, I'm gonna defer to using an analog delay when I into an AC, like think about Edge top boost AC30s, bright, lots of chime, all that stuff, and that darker analog delay was a great match when you're not just the amps turn up to 3 or 4, get a little bit of grind going but not too much, and then the delay's bouncing back and getting compressed by that, and the delay's kind of dark and pretty heavily modulated usually with Edge. Which is giving it a chorus kind of effect or vibrato on the delay repeats, and it's got this movement to it, and it sounds great. That's the classic kind of usage for analog delay to me. Tape delay and digital delay, more ripping guitar solos. I want clarity. I want it to be on all the time, as like maybe mixed in the back, but there's maybe a 500 and 250. One on 500 millisecond one side, 250 the other side, and it's just bouncing around, giving me a little bit of ambience, a little bit more of a modern usage, than the analog can be a little more prominent, like the Edge, right? Like where it's actually bouncing back at the exact same level of the dry guitar. Is that making sense? I use digital more for stuff like that, like more all-purpose delay usage. Guitar solos that I play, generally have digital delay on them, but they're post distortion, and I've attenuated some of the high end on them usually, but not as much as you would find on an analog delay. I'll tend to attenuate low end on digital delays too, so they go more into mid range. I'm almost putting a bit of analog character in my digital. That's kind of what I like. So it's not exactly like the dry sound and real loud, but I like to attenuate some of the top end, but not as an analog delay. To me, a lot of them are, a DM2 or whatever Boss, they're shut down above like 1K. It's all low mids and mids. They have no clarity. Memory Man, more top end, but still, it's quite a warm sound to me. So just different. Tape delay has some of the characteristics of analog, but generally speaking, a tape delay is more, it's a lot brighter. And then depending on the age of the tape, how hard you hit the tape, the delay can actually be distorting, which can be cool. And then the age of the tape and the condition of the heads and all that, how dirty the heads are, you can get that wow and flutter, which is adding its own kind of imperfect, very unpredictable modulation that is really organic and cool to the sound. Tape delay, because it's brighter and a little clearer, generally speaking, can work post distortion too and sound really cool. So sometimes I'll do that as opposed to digital. Why do I keep looking at the microphone today? I keep looking at it like it's the thing that I'm supposed to be looking at as opposed to you guys. That's weird. I just realized I was doing that. Sorry. But anyways, I would say 70% of the time, if a delay is post distortion for me, or 75, I'm doing a digital thing where I've rolled off a bit of top end, a bit of low end, you know, and I'm just, yeah. And if it's analog, I'm running it in front. I've usually got some vibrato on it because edge, I don't know, it's just cool too, the mod and the way it moves. And tape delay, I'm either running it in front or sometimes not as commonly post. And I'm going for that slightly distorted character that it's got. It's a different sound than analog. More distorted, less predictable. Yeah. Helpful or just more confusing? You be the judge. Do you think that mini gear demos are more about the player than the gear? Some play way too much. Well, yeah, I do. Even more in the old days when I used to do demos, I tried to really play simply. Like if you look at the very first ones I did, I was playing old rock songs, just the rhythm a lot, playing a lot of chords. And then when I got more into composing little pieces of music for each video, I would try and make it musical, but still put the sound of the gear at the forefront. So if I do a delay, you're going to hear a lot of delay, and the part is going to reflect so I want to make it a nice part to listen to and the song to sound cool, but I'm not there to shred for you, even though sometimes I might go into that, And the most important thing, and this is the fine line, is to make the sound very apparent. And then also hopefully make the piece of music interesting. It's a fine line, I guess, but that's my MO. That's how I developed my channel. The whole, was trying to do that. These gear demos in it, still make it musical, but make it clear what the thing did and not just about me, So, is it a good idea to have an audiologist or frequency loss profile for your ears so you know where to boost and where to reduce? Well, also just to make sure you're where you're at, as a baseline, and make sure you're not cranking your, in-ears, or you want to maintain your ear health for as long as possible in this business. So it's sometimes a little terrifying to go in, but luckily I've got pretty good hearing still. Like when I go in, they're like, yeah, you're pretty on par they're never like, ooh, you've got significant loss. They never say that. They're always like, you've got a little bit of loss here and here, but it's totally normal for your age, and you're pretty on par, especially for being a musician, for where you should be at this point in your life. So, they're generally like, good job. I feel good about it. And I'm like, great. That's all. That's the best as I can hope for, because I like loud guitar. So I think there's a lot of just luck of the draw on this stuff. Some people seem to lose their hearing easier than others due to noise or maybe other factors, And I think I've lucked out and I've got pretty good, I've got two grandparents that had wildly different, my one grandmother had terrible hearing. She lived till she was 99. Another one was 97. She could hear everything all the way to 97, no problem. So it's interesting. It's just what causes that, why the difference, with some folks. But it's good to have a baseline. I recommend going to the audiologist once in a while and getting, and also then you can get some molds done for in-ears, if you need them, and or for custom earplugs, or, just have them pour some molds for you so you can have those on file at least if you want to order some. What do we got here? It's about 1:41. I'm going to split pretty soon. I've been going about an hour and 52. So yeah, I'll go another 10, 15 minutes and then I'll get out of here and get some work done. I'm going to make more of these captures for Tone X, and I'll have a Tone X video coming this week, come hell or high water. I got to get it done. So it's taken a long time just because I'm incorporating doing captures into the process of me making the video, and it's all I worked on last week. And I'm like, okay, I need to finish this up. So, yeah. Ooh, you guys are talking about radius. So I'm so far back. I'm going to go down to the bottom of the. Ooh, I got super chats to get to here, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom of the chat, and so just ask again if Helgi with super chat there. Thank you, man. Giving me the devil horns. I appreciate it. Just ask again if you want to just update your question down at the bottom there, and I'll get some at the bottom. Taking so long today with my answers. In high school, I ran a PV Bandit Backstage Plus. One clean and one dirty. That's cool. A Digitech dual delay. That was it. These days I can't keep up with gear enough to build a rig. Well, it's like, just crack my neck. like bad today. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's confusing, for sure. And the simplicity that it was cool back then. There wasn't so many options, and we tended to play more. So it's what can you do? You can I guess pay some tribute to that awareness that you had back then. It was easier, and maybe try and do that again. And get off the gear train and play more. If you feel like that would be a good thing for you to do. Cletus says, thanks for stopping to say hello at NAMM, even though you were obviously on your way somewhere. I had fun at NAMM, and I love meeting people there and chatting for a second. Obviously, it's so busy, the show, and you see people every 5 seconds and stuff to say, but that's part of it for me. I love it. So, Travis, thank you for the super chat. Travis says, when you come to Charleston, South Carolina with Fight for Fighting, is it possible to get your autograph? I'm sure we could work that out somehow. Did we do a meet and greet thing? I don't think we did. Maybe at one of the shows or some of the shows. I don't know what the deal will be with this tour, because we're opening for Bare Naked Ladies. This is this tour I'm embarking on June through July. So I'll get more info, but I'm sure we can figure something out. Like, once again, I love meeting folks. So, did Pete review the Andy Timmons Halo Sig pedal? Indeed, I did. And I gave it a great review, because it's a great pedal, so it was easy. I gave it thumbs up. Flying colors. What else we got here? What else are you guys talking about? Moving down through the chat. Making sure. Oh, there's some super chats I don't want to miss. Trevor, coffee. Thank you. Appreciate it. Got to do it. Coffee every day. More coffee right now. I'll have a little bit more after lunch, and then I'll be able to keep working until later in the day, because it keeps my brain working like this. Douglas says, can you describe your drum programming process and tools for your videos? Thank you for the super chat. Thank you to the previous super chat. You guys are too kind. Keeping the coffee flowing. Superior Drummer 2, 3. Superior Drummer 3 or Easy Drummer 2 are the main things that I use now for drums. Tune track products. The main way I get drum sounds, this is probably 85% of the drums I do. I'll go in, and I bought a bunch of their expansion libraries, which is kits as well as grooves. So I've got a whole thousands of grooves that they come with. There's a thing called Tap to Find, where I'll write a little riff and go, okay, I need drums now, and the right drum groove would be doom, 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 doom. So first thing I do is set the tempo in my DAW. 79 beats a minute, 83 beats a minute, whatever that is. Okay, we got that. Now I go in and open up Superior Drummer, Tap to Find, boom, 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 boom. There's my kick drum pattern. Now, tap in my snare, then my hi-hat. Right? Now it kicks out a bunch of grooves. It'll say, this is a groove that's 89% exact similar to that, and then this one's 88%, this one's 79%, this one's whatever, and it kicks out like a whole bunch of grooves in a browser, and I can listen to them all by clicking on them. Like, that one's very close to what I want. Drag that over into a thing called the Song Creator. Boom. Pop it in. Kicks out a whole bunch of intros, verses, choruses, pre-choruses, bridges, outros, fills. All in a very easy and organized browser. And I can listen to those. So generally what's happened at this point is I've written one riff. And it's like, there's a riff. Now I've got my drum groove that matches that riff. That was the first one that I tapped in. I chose one that sounded similar. I'll pull that out onto my grid. It's a MIDI file. It's usually a bar long, maybe 4 bars long, maybe 2, depending on the groove. Pop that in. And now I'll go listen to the chorus beats or the pre-chorus beats. And they might be a little different. And that might inspire me then to go, oh, okay, now the next part of this song, because I just had my initial riff. Next part, maybe I got to go to this chord. And I might get inspired by what the plugin's kicking out to me, groove-wise. And it might be, maybe it's like halftime for the chorus, or a different, or a tom groove, jungle kind of groove, or something in the underneath the bridges, and I'll take that and incorporate it into the song, right? And then maybe I'm like, okay, now I want the next section to go like this. None of these grooves sound like that. I'll go back to tap the find, go in and tap in another groove, find one like that. Boom. That whole process, what I'm describing right now, that I've gotten very used to using and is super organic and fast and much easier than programming on a MIDI keyboard or something. That whole process takes maybe 25, 30 minutes. And then I've got a drum track, boom, in a half an hour, totally assembled. Now and through that process, I've kind of written the rest of the song, like the chords and everything, because the drums have helped inspire where it's going to go, right? So, and then I'll try and go through generally and lay all that down on a scratch guitar track so that I don't forget, because I will forget. If I get up to go answer a phone call or coffee or something, I will forget. So I'll go in and then lay down those parts just in a scratch track. It doesn't have to be a good sound or anything. It doesn't matter. Just so that I remember the riff and the chords and the movement. Okay, got that now. And now, then I will proceed to, at that point, go through, start dialing in, if it's a pedal or an amp or whatever, the specific sounds. And I go through and I start tracking each of the individual guitar parts for each part, making, you know what I mean? And that's how I do it. And that's how generally I can get an idea done. Sometimes it takes longer than a day, you know, but sometimes I can get it done in 3 hours, you know, the whole thing, you know, and it's like, great, done. That's how I do it, the little demos that I make. Occasionally I want a more unique drum sound than what I'm hearing out of Superior. I mean, there's a ton of kits in there and a ton of variety, but I will go to, there's a Butch Vig plugin that I can't remember what it's called, but it's a Butch Vig drum plugin for Contact Player, which is another plugin that I'll use within Logic. And it's got these amazing sounding kind of blown up, distorted drums, and it comes with a bunch of grooves. You know, sometimes I'll take the grooves out of Superior Drummer that were MIDI grooves and put those down on a Butch Vig track with the other plugin, and the MIDI doesn't always translate. Like the kick, I gotta go in and change it in the grid to make it line up, because you know, where the MIDI is, it doesn't work. Like, oh, it's triggering a hi-hat here instead of a snare, so I'll go in and have to move it. But I can make if I can't find the groove in the Butch Vig plugin, I'll grab one from Superior Drummer and I'll make it work. And so I'm going between the plugins and stuff and using different ways. Sometimes I use Apple Drummer. That worked great on something I did last week. Or Logic Drummer, I guess it's called. It's this simple drum plugin within Logic. Yeah. You guys here in the chat are talking about different. I'm back 20 minutes in the chat here, but you're talking about some bands of the time. I was talking about the 80s and the 90s and stuff. I've got super chats to grab there. I will do that in just a sec. But Soundgarden is more progressive rock to me than grunge. The great thing about Soundgarden was they're very difficult to classify to me. So there was elements of the Beatles. They had banjos in their music. There was elements of, you know, right on Ty Cobb. There was elements of a lot of punk rock going on. There's a lot of Black Sabbath going on. A lot of Led Zeppelin going on. And then a lot of Beatles going on. And it was a true sum of the parts of all the different players in that band. You know, when you think about a band like Faith No More, it was similar, like where you had these different, disparate whatever influences, you know, that were coming from different places and assembling into a band. It was a really great time in music when, you know, you could do that. Even Dave Grohl, you know, I saw a really interesting thing. Not that this should be a surprise because it's Dave Grohl or anything, but I saw an interesting thing recently where he was talking about the da-da, came from, like, was it What Is Hip or something? Or I can't remember the drums, but it was a total, like, you know, funky R&B track where the drummer would do that, you know, and he's like, this is where I got that from. And then I just did it in the context of Nirvana, you know, and it was always the right. Like, when is that ever not right? It's like just laying it down like that. So, I mean, those kinds of influences, it was just such a... And when we're talking about this, like, you guys are talking about hair metal bands and stuff and how, this is what I'm talking about, was they got a very samey and very safe. And musically, it was like there was a very cookie cutter kind of thing. And grunge, one of the great things about it was it didn't really have that. Soundgarden was probably one of the bands that explored the most out into the nether regions of doing different things within their, you know. Nirvana was like maybe a little, for all the, you know, impact they had, they were a little safer, I would say. And it was a little more like, just still, you know, the influences were tighter. But you still had this very interesting Beatley mixed with nursery rhyme kind of melodies, you know, and then with this crazy aggressive punk rock thing. And then I guess, like Dave is saying, from coming from the drums perspective, which were amazing in that band, you had a little bit of this R&B and funk stuff going on that he was like. So, people didn't really do that in the 80s with hair metal. They weren't pulling from, James Brown or anything like that. There was nothing like that going on. It got too, in the late 80s specifically, it just got too formulaic, I think. That said, Jeff's talking about Andy Timmons. Andy's one of the greatest guitar players, and he could play amazing like that back then. He was brilliant. That's why he's gone on to have a great career and be highly respected. Because he had depth. He's got great depth. Yeah. Todd says White Lion and so many bands ripped off Van Halen. For sure. With the image and the the whole. Vito was a great guitar player. He kind of fell off the map and just sort of went away, by choice, I think. But he was a great guitar player. But certainly it's hard to break out of that image if that was your, the image was of, the hair and the, certain lyrics and stuff like that. It was, if you wrote a song like Cherry Pie or something, that was obviously wasn't them. But, if you did that, it was hard to break away from that. Now you're pigeonholed, because you went there. So, yeah. Okay. I feel like there was a lot of great musicians in some of them. Absolutely, there was a lot of great musicians, think about, the Winger guys were, Morgenstein, was in Dixie Dregs, they were monsters. So, okay. Super chats I got to grab before I get out of here and stuff too. And let's see, was there ever a tour gig you turned down and then really regretted it? The one that I didn't. Yeah, there was a couple actually. Like one that would have been interesting, and I don't know what would have happened, but there was the band Lifehouse, which had the song "Hanging by a Moment" in the early 2000s. Would be 2000 or 2001. Or maybe 99, I went and picked up a CD from their producer, and I was supposed to go the next day to an audition or 2 days later to an audition for the slot of touring guitar player with them. And I already had a touring gig at that point. So I listened to the song, and it was Hanging by a Moment, which ended up becoming a really big hit back then for, it was all over radio. And it's a great song, actually, and I still like that song to this day. I called them and I said, I don't think I'm going to come audition because I said, I've already got a touring gig. And I said, I'm pretty happy with it at the moment. And I said, it's a great song. And I heard later after the fact through somebody else that ended up touring with them on keys that they were like, I believe the singer's name is Jason. Like, oh, he thinks you don't like his band because you didn't go to the audition. I was like, no, it wasn't that at all. I actually really thought it was a good song and everything, but I had a gig at the time, and I was just like, what am I doing? Why am I going out for another audition? I shouldn't be. I should just be focusing on the tour I have. In retrospect, it was stupid. A friend of mine, Stuart Mathis, was playing with them, and he had recorded a lot of the guitars on the record. And I always was like, I think would have gone down and gotten that gig that day had I done that. And the drummer that ended up in the band, literally 2 cars pulled up at the producer's house that day to go pick up CDs for this audition that was happening that week. One of them was mine, and another one was Rick, who was from Phoenix, had just arrived in LA. He ended up being the drummer in Lifehouse from that audition, and he did it for the next 15 years or something like that. He's not in the band anymore, but he did it for years and years and years and years and years. And he was a band member, Obviously, he worked his way. They didn't track on. It was one of those things where it was, the singer that went in and made the record with some studio ringers or whatever, and then they got some guys to tour kind of thing. But a lot of those guys ended up on the next records, and they did become more of a band. And I always wanted to be in a band, And I liked that guy. He was a great singer, and I liked his songs. I thought he was really quite good. So that's one where I went like, oh, that was a friggin' dumb move. And he thought I didn't, and I met him years later and stuff, and he was always cool. But it wasn't that at all, that I didn't like his band. It was kind of weird. But anyways, that was one where okay, that could have taken a different turn. Maybe in 2000, 2001, 2002, I could have been doing that and then making records with a band. Who knows? Maybe I could have been in on some of the songwriting and been a little, my career would have taken a different path, different trajectory, But That's the one that comes to mind that I sort of turned down, that I had a full opportunity to go in there and do and then didn't. Can't really think of others. I did turn down others where I just got a distaste. A couple where I went to the initial audition, I didn't like the scene, and then I just didn't. I got even one where I got a call back and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna go because I just didn't like the people or something that were involved in the project. So, but the Lifehouse one was the one that I really remember as being sort of silly. Like, why didn't I go at least check that out? You kind of want to go check everything out and then get offered the gig and then maybe turn down the gig if you feel like it's not for you. But, you want to push it, like go check out opportunities, always. I didn't learn that until maybe later. Maybe that was one of the things that helped formulate that. Always do your best, go down, nail it down, learn, and then, once you get in the room with the people and feel it out, you want to get offered everything and turn it down. You don't want to turn, well, maybe when you're younger, it's like, maybe I don't know, it's not quite my kind of music, or no, screw all that. Like, go down, investigate all the opportunities, because even if all that happens is you meet a manager or a producer or something that day at the audition or whatever, there's always things that come of exposing yourself to those situations, putting yourself out there. Nothing's 100% perfect ever right out of the gate, So, it's weird how we can talk ourselves out of things sometimes and I did that with that one. I talked myself out of even going to an audition for no good reason, kind of, when I look back on it. It was stupid. So, you used Scumbag speakers a lot years ago, not much anymore, just sticking with Celestians. Were there issues? No, never any issues. Literally, it just came down to when I started having signature amps and stuff, we needed something that we could sell and offer and have lots of, and, availability and also cost and, different factors that came in. And I like the Celestians. It was like after going down a route of, a lot of trying a bunch of greenbacks and stuff, I was like, I'm pretty good with just the greenbacks that are coming out of, I think that it was this whole thing recently, now made in the UK, but at the time they were Chinese made. They were fine. They were reliable. They sounded good. They sounded like a greenback to me. Maybe they had a little more fizz on the top end than like an M75 Scumbag. But Scumbag was actually they were going through things at the time where they were changing from Weber making the speakers to making them in-house. And there was a whole kind of, a period like that. And it was like a little up in the air. And they were a little more money, and it was like a lot of factors, So I still have Scumbag loaded cabs, but my main cab that's out in the other room is an old greenback loaded cab, by old, I mean 70s ones. So, Shocked and Persuaded, thanks for the super chat. Finally, I have my Musicom Lab Mark 6 wired and programmed. Fantastic piece of kit. Curious you have the in-out buffers on all the time. I have the input buffer on, and that's it, I think. Or maybe the in and the out. I don't know. I'd have to look. I can't remember, to tell you the truth. Yeah, I don't remember. I have a buffer bay from Friedman anyway, and I use a wireless, so it's like buffers. It's like I'm buffered. I'm overly buffered probably. But generally, I just leave the input buffer on, and that's it, I think, as I remember. I'd have to... Don't quote me on that, though. I have to double check. Yeah, okay. Ben Coombs, what's up, dude? He says, just a reminder, he's live tonight at 8 p.m. He's got his show this evening, 8 p.m. Eastern. Peter, thank you for the super chat, my friend. May have missed videos this week. Tone X, try and knock it out and get it done this week. I got to get it finished, so I'm going to work on that later today. Hopefully have it sewn up mostly by the end of tomorrow, would be my wish. Yeah. Okay. Christopher, thank you guys for these super chats. I'm burping. Excuse me. Hold it. Which order would you run a Bluesbreaker and Tube Screamer into a clean Fender? I would use the Bluesbreaker second and run the Screamer into it, because you're kind of using the Bluesbreaker as your amp, right? The ampy distortion. You're not going to get a lot of volume bump, if any. You might get a little, as long as you're not driving overdriving too much on the Bluesbreaker. If the Bluesbreaker is, fat edge of breakup, you'll probably still get a little volume bump when you kick the Screamer on. So put the Screamer in front, as though it was kicking a Bluesbreaker amp, right? Thank you for that super chat, my friend. Appreciate that. Okay. Here's a super chat from Telecaster Master. More coffee, more work. More coffee, more work. I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it. It works for me. Fresh pots, like Grohl said years ago. Magnum SG. Thank you guys for these super chats. I bought your Sir Thornbucker Plus for my Strat. Play mostly classic hard rock. What single coils in the neck and middle would you recommend? I really am a big fan of the V63s. They leave me wanting for nothing. Sir V63. If you record drums with more than one mic, you need an interface with more than one input? Yes. Probably a stupid question, but I'm not super smart. Oh, you're so hard on yourself. Don't be so self-deprecating. Great to have you here every week. I get the self-deprecating thing. I do that too. I'm Canadian. We all do. Yeah, generally speaking, it's going to be one microphone per input. I mean, you could submix. So the option would be to have a little outboard mixer that you could plug a few microphones into and then send one output or maybe a stereo output to your recording interface. So you're submixing a few microphones down to one or two outputs that go into one input of a recording interface. But most recording interfaces these days have at least a couple, if not 4 or sometimes 8 mic pre's, depending on which one you have. So I actually have the ability to do 16 here. Not that I ever would, because I'm not doing live drums here. But most of the inputs I ever recorded at any one time, it's probably 3 in this setting. I did do drums, though, here for my last record. I did them out in another room, and I took my my Apollo, which I'd just gotten, my X8P. God, I've had it for a number of years now. That's wild. But yeah, it had just shown up, and I thought this is a perfect opportunity before I install it in the studio to just use it out in the other room. And I set up drums out there, Kurt Biscara playing drums, and set up all the mics, did 8 mics, and I just had the interface right there in the room with my laptop. And we recorded the drums that way, no proper control room or anything. Just set the mics, did a pass, listened to it. It's like, yeah, it sounds good. Let's go. He's a great drummer, and he knows where to place mics and stuff as well. So that's the drum sounds on, at least L'Avenir, the last song, Remember. Those tracks were recorded that way. I'm happy with those sounds. Best drum sound on the record's probably Dirty Town, because that was done at my friend's studio, which was basically full-blown, very nice studio. But I think we got great drum sounds still on the other ones. Did you listen to Blue Murder and The Firm? Not so much The Firm. I listened to Blue Murder, though. Really liked Blue Murder. Because, once again, Sykes. He was just next level, I think we all heard the White Snake, like where a lot of the writing and the, give credit where credit is due, right? Blue Murder, in the 1987 album, White Snake album, the solos and the, you know what I mean? It was like you could hear where a lot of that was coming from. I think it was Sykes, because, God, there were some great songs on the Blue Murder stuff. I really like John. I've gotten to know him a little bit. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but a couple of years ago, I spoke to him quite a bit. And that was like a thrill for me, because he, big influence, Big influence. Stealth Parrot says Stuart Mathis is an amazing place for Lucinda Williams. Yeah, he's a great guy and great guitar player, great songwriter. Moved to Nashville a number of years ago, so I don't really see him anymore, but I always really liked him. Stuart is awesome. Have you seen him with Lucinda? I haven't, actually, but haven't talked to him in years, but I got along quite well with him. This is 20 years ago, that I knew him, and he's very good. Yeah. Okay. What else we got here? Didn't you turn down Roth and recommend Estrada? I guess you could put it that way. Yeah, I did. When they called me and said, would you, can you come out? And this was when Dave was doing his band. Can't remember if he'd already been through some players yet, but it seemed like there was quite a few players kind of coming and going. And I got a call to go down and play, and a number of things were weighed on my decision. One of them was I was friends with Ed, and at that point, Ed had not passed away, and I was friends with Ed, and I thought that was really the number one thing. I think I was like, that doesn't sit well with me. I'm not going to go down and judging from the, you know what I mean? You know what I think it's unspoken, right? Like I didn't want to jeopardize that or make him feel, you know what I mean? Like just no. And the other thing was, I just had this like, I've always like Al Estrada is amazing at playing that music, and he knows how to do it. He's done it for 20, 30 years at this point, 30 years probably, and it's just in his DNA of the way he plays at this point. So I remember talking with the guy from the management company on the phone and going, call this guy. I can pretty much guarantee he will come down tomorrow. You can ask him to play pretty much any song that you're going to want him to play, and he will play it, and he will, with the greatest of ease, just kind of, there it is, and as much as you could hope for, and he sings, and I was just like, I just think this is the path, and yeah, and then I hung up the phone and went, was that a good idea? Like, did I just, and then without saying more about, I just think it was the right decision, but even, I'm happy to say from the Ed perspective, I didn't feel comfortable with how would I, have been like, hey, I'm going to go play with Dave. Like, like to, it just, I didn't, one thing with Ed was I was always like, it was always good. Like since I met him, and you could be on the outs maybe pretty easily if, saying something or doing something. I never wanted to offend him or like, cause he's such an important part of my musical, upbringing. And I really valued his, but I recognize there's a delicate thing there. So I just was like, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So that's the easiest way to describe how that happened. It's kind of funny because I forgot about that. And when somebody asked, like, is there ever a gig that you didn't go down for that you regret? I don't mean this in a bad way towards Dave, but it didn't chart on my radar of one of them. And that is one of the reasons why, because it just seemed like spiritually or whatever, it was the right decision to make, on many levels, but, and I wished him all the, know anything about Dave or anything like that. It just seemed like, it was like, this is your, like standing above it and looking down on it once again, this is the way to go. Call this fella Al and carry on, by the end of next week, you'll have a band that is sounding slamming, anyways, that's what happened. Is LA or Nashville a better music scene for aspiring musicians? I don't know, to be honest, at this point. It's a great question. I mean, I would say it's different for different players. If you're in the pop world, R&B, some rock of some sort still happening. You want to be a touring musician in the pop world, you're not going to go to Nashville. I'll say that. If you're in, there's amazing musicians in Nashville. It's a different scene, and it's not just country. That's not what I'm saying. There's a healthy indie rock thing going on there and stuff. But there's no R&B and pop tours, I don't think, that are being based out of Nashville. Not really. So it depends what world you're in. If you want to write songs, sessions, and you want to do it in Americana or country or anything, you're not going to probably do that in LA. I know a lot of people that have tried to do that in LA for a while and went like, why aren't I in Nashville? And they moved there. Yeah. I've been listening since day one, and that's the first time I heard the Lifehouse story. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I don't think I ever mentioned that before. It was an interesting question. Have you ever turned down an audition and regretted it? I've never had that question before, I don't think. Have we talked about the new Benson Eckerek? I maybe mentioned it after NAMM, but I'd love to do a demo of it for sure. Let's see, Andy Rex Cams, coffee for you. Thank you, sir. You got me into Selection Differences, and I have a V30 Greenback and I have V30 Greenback and V30s. You mean you have V30s and Greenbacks, I guess, but cannot find a Blackback for a reasonable price. I think you probably mean you have H30s, right? That's probably what you meant. I cannot find a Blackback for a reasonable price in the UK. Keep looking. You'll probably find a set of 4 or something for $1,200 or something. A few hundred a speaker. That's probably what they go for now for a reasonable. If that maybe that seems excessive. I don't know. But sounds like you got it pretty covered anyway. What else we got here? Have you played the Doug Aldrich pickings in anything? I have them in my brown CERN Modern, the brown one with the scrape binding. That's got those pickups in it, and it's cool. I've never changed them. I might try something else at some point, but yeah. I wish Sykes would just get out and play. I would love it if he would go out and play too. I would. He's amazing. Yeah. Just answering the last few, looking through the end. Sort of like dating a friend's ex. Yeah, exactly. The whole, you don't think Ed would have given you his blessing and stayed friends? I don't know, but I just didn't want to go there. RH says that was a great move setting Estrada up with Dave. Selfless. It just felt like the right thing to do. I think that Ziegbert says, as much as I love Diamond Dave, he was not at his best at this point. Yeah, there's just a few. I don't want to whatever, but I'll just say like they were coming out with those re-recordings of old Van Halen tracks and stuff, And there's a part of me. There's a lot of people that say, but they're like, why, you already and it does feel a little like I don't like the assertion that this is my band. I always did everything, and I don't like that stuff, And it's like I try to not talk, I try and stay out of that and just be in Switzerland. But there's a part of me where it was like, just to be honest, I guess I don't feel bad about saying it. That's just disrespectful towards Ed, and that wouldn't, I don't think that would sit well with me if I was Ed and there was somebody like me going and playing, some re-recorded version of Unchained or something. And obviously if you get the gig, you do what you're told, and it's like that would be, today we're going to record a version of this and I'm going to release it, and it's like that would have made me uncomfortable, like as a, I don't know, just I had a lot in confidence. I had a lot of talks over the years with Ed about that dynamic between the band and stuff that I'll never discuss publicly, just kind of like the dynamic and stuff. And it's like, it's no secret that it was fraught with, there was always a lot of tension and stuff like that. And there's no reason for me to add any of that. But if I have to pick a camp, I'm Camp Van Halen. So, does that make sense? I guess. So Eddie is, I think, more sensitive than people realize. He was a sensitive guy, He was had a big heart, and if you, he was a complicated guy, and it was a complicated time and stuff. And there's a lot of, he obviously made mistakes in his life, like we all do and stuff. But he was sensitive, and he had a real, and I just never wanted to. He's my hero on guitar, so I never wanted to disrespect that for an opportunity or something, especially, you know what I mean? That was always really important to me. So, I don't know. Yeah. Would you like to go on a huge worldwide pop tour? Sure. I mean, if the pay's right. Yeah. I mean, I'm totally down with still doing stuff like that. It just depends on the gig. I mean, if it's like, I've got friends that go doing this, my Max Bernstein, who I don't know that well, but he plays with Taylor Swift. That's probably the biggest one you can do at this point. Gigs like that. It's a great paying gig, and they have a lot of fun, and there's no, there's a hell of a lot to like. So, I've played a little bit with pop artists Mylène Farmer in France, who's like the Madonna of France. That was my one. It was just France, Switzerland, Belgium, Russia, but I did do that tour a number of years ago for about 5 months, and it was as big a scale as we did 12 or 13 nights at Bercy in Paris. That's like the size of the Staples Center here in LA. Like consecutive nights, 12 gigs in a row, you know. She's huge. She's like a stadium artist over there. So I've done that with dancers and the whole 9 yards, you know. You can find it on, you can barely see me, but I'm back there in the band. If you want to search for Mylene, Mylene, Farmer, Farmer, Monkey Me Tour. It was called 2013. Anything live with her in 2013. That was that tour I did. It was an experience. One of the things about it is no amps on stage. You're on a riser in the back. You come down on stage during certain things, just for certain key solos and stuff. It's very, you know, structured. It's almost like they push play at the beginning of the show because everything's, of course, done to some sort of tracks and a bit of you know, lights and everything. So, and it's all coordinated heavily. And it's almost like at the beginning you go, and then I'll see you in an hour and 30 minutes, and at the end you're done. Like, and it's like it's almost like doing a play or something where you feel like we're starting, here it goes, and then there's not a lot of improv is what I'm getting at in the middle, you know. And I like that. There's a element about it that's fun from a job well done standpoint when you get through the show at the end, and you know, and you feel like, but it's a different kind of show. It's not what you would come to see a Chris Cornell show for or something, or one of the other things I've done, you know, or rock, even like Melissa Etheridge's very organic show, changes every night. She mixes up the songs. She likes to do long extended jams, and you know, she likes a little chaos and stuff like that. So guitars for your project with the super chat. How do you achieve noiseless Sir pickups in another guitar without SC2? The Illich system, right? Backplate. Just look for backplate Strat Illich. Is it Illich? Is that how you spell it? You can use one of those systems and it works quite well. It's what Sir used before they did their own system. Yeah, that'll work great for other guitars. Surfer B says, Eddie seemed to have found some peace and was recharged when he started playing with his son. I would agree with that. Yeah, he was very proud, and that really fired him up to keep going and keep him on a good path, you know. Definitely. You rule. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. I'm going to go soon, but I am having fun. So it's 2:20. I'll go to 2:25. 2:25, and then I'm splitting and get some lunch and stuff. Isn't Al Estrada a Covina, California guy? Yeah, I think, I don't know about Covina, but yeah, I think he's from here and been here a long time. He's a very nice guy. I like Al a lot. Excuse me. He's a great guitar player too. Like, terrific. You also did a Mandy Moore gig. I did. That's true. With a Line 6 pod. I did that. Is it a dummy coil system? Are we talking about the Illich system? Yeah, it's a coil of some sort. Yeah, and it's pretty much dead quiet. Favorite guitar solo of all time? Let's go with Eruption. Come on. Green Jackson in the back? Yes. Yeah. You and Mitch Malloy doing any more shows? Not currently or anything. I think Mitch's been working on a solo record. That's what he's been doing. That was just a fun, you know, kind of a one-off thing that we did. But yeah, I'm not ruling out ever doing something down the road. We had fun. Yeah. Have you seen any of the recent Nuno YouTube press? No? What is it? Is it all good? Is there drama? What are some of the oh moments referring to iconic riffs you've learned to play through your many years as a guitar player? The moments, not moments. Good question. Really getting inside some of Alex Lifeson stuff is really interesting. Like, you know, for instance, the solo to YYZ I had learned recently, and it's very difficult to play it exactly note for note. You kind of can't. The phrasing is so loose. I'm like, how does he do that? You know, but it's really neat, and you can see, I see what he's going for, and the kind of the scale that the way he was approaching the kind of super Eastern sounding. This is really creative. He's a very creative guitar player. Even learning Spirit of Radio and stuff is interesting. The way that he kind of mixed up the different sections rhythmically and stuff. Same chords, but different rhythmic approach and stuff. Lots of Eddie stuff that I learned was, it's like, God, how did you think of that? Solo to Somebody Give Me a Doctor is really interesting. The second riff. So down, down, da 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 da. That one. So cool. Like, and we're like, oh, that's how he did it. It's like, that is so weird. There's a few things like in his phrasing and stuff. It's so unique, So it's very cool. Well, it's 2:23. Let's wrap this up. Beato Nuno incoming. I did see that he did a interview with Nuno, so that'll be interesting. Yeah. SL68 for 5 tour, like 5 for fighting, wouldn't be the right amp for that. I haven't decided what I'm using yet. I may just use what I used last time, which was Quad Cortex into a power amp and a couple 112s. It worked well. This is not our show. It's our show, but it's we're opening for another band. So on, off, fast is probably good. And it's a 45-minute set, I think. So, I don't know that I'd need to get like into programming a whole new, I don't think it sounded great last year. So I may end up just going the route of hooking up last year's pedal board and calling up the sounds and making little tweaks, going, yeah, that's fine, for what we're going to do. If I was to do an amp and cab, would either be the PT15, I think, because it's the right volume for the gig, or maybe the Top Hat for the AC30 thing, and a 212, I've got a nice 212 that I could take, but I think that the more that I think about this, when I go down that road and I start thinking, well, then this and that factor and this factor in the pedal, I go, just use what you did last year. It sounded great, which was captures of this anyway, into a couple of 112s. It's not a lot of reason to switch it up that I can think of. Richard says, thanks. Always a highlight for my Sunday. Hey, thank you. Thank you guys for being here. Next week, I will be back, and by then, let's talk about the Tone X. Maybe I can play the Tone X and hook it up with some of the sounds that... I'll play some guitar next week. I'll have some of the sounds that I dialed up for the video, hopefully, or something. Because by then, I'll have them in the pedal. It's real easy to hook the pedal up and just use it on here and stuff. We can page through some of the presets and all that business. So, what are my preferred 112s? My PTs. I got my own 112 cab. That's a Serb 112, basically, but with H75s. They're really good. I feel like H75 Creamback's a great, at 75 watts, terrific speaker for a 112. It'll handle a fair amount of power, and it's a really versatile speaker as well. Sounds good clean, sounds good dirty. All right, guys. Everybody have a terrific week, and be nice to one another and all that good stuff. And remember, analog. See ya.